Several children were happily playing together, holding hands. A woman calls one of the children by the name of Tidus. The child smiles happily when he sees his mother and father waiting for him. He won't delay any longer. This time he will. He decides to live with his family in happiness, in this world where he has been reincarnated. Tidus joyfully runs to his parents. On one of the unremarkable evenings, when it was already dark outside the windows of the office building, several employees left the office, saying that it was quite a long meeting. One of them says wearily that he still has a lot to do. His colleague, Araki Susumu, smilingly asked him to just stick to the previous pace of work so they could finish the job. Araki says they should work hard to have a good New Year's Eve. That day was Araki's birthday. He turned 50. He has a wife of the same age. He is also the father of 2 children. A daughter is graduating from college, and a son is just entering. Araki now works for a construction company and is the head of 6 branches. That day was a celebration on the occasion of his daughter's new job. 3 members of his family, excluding him, were invited to dinner. Araki thinks that he is not participating because he is busy with work. However, he immediately corrects himself, realizing that they didn't even call him. Around the time his daughter reached puberty, he didn't know how to approach his children and blamed everything on his wife, resulting in him being a stranger in his own home. Araki says that although he turns 50 today, he still feels sorry. However, he is well aware that, despite everything, he loves his wife and children. Araki leaves the office and sees small snowdrifts on the street. He says, slightly surprised, that although it was sunny in the afternoon, it was a snowy Christmas. Araki stares at the street in fascination as the clouds of smoke from his dark breath dissolve into the cool air. Suddenly, he feels a strange pain and clutches at his heart. A few moments pass, and he collapses face down on the asphalt right in front of his office. Araki's eyes slowly close. He feels that consciousness is slowly leaving him. All he thinks about is that he wants to go home and be with his family. After that, everything goes dark, and he loses consciousness. Araki slowly regains consciousness after an unknown amount of time, and the first thing he thinks about is where he is at all. He feels as if his body is floating in the void, and therefore he does not understand if he is conscious or alive at all. However, he also realizes that he cannot feel his limbs and cannot even open his eyes. Because of this, Araki suddenly wonders if he is breathing at all. He also realizes that there is complete silence around him. He does not hear anything at all. He doesn't understand what's going on at all. However, suddenly he realizes that he can hear something in the distance. He feels vibrations and sound and realizes that it is a heartbeat. Araki smiles softly and thinks that he feels a bit nostalgic. However, he also thinks about how much time has passed since he spent the whole time there doing nothing. Suddenly, he sees a bright light in front of him. He also feels like it's getting hot in there. Araki realizes that if he forces himself to move, he will most likely be able to reach this bright light. As he gets closer, Araki sees that the light is incredibly bright. After entering it, he feels some kind of liquid and inhales the air, thinking about how he has been breathing all this time. After that, Araki feels cold and nostalgic. His eyes are still closed, but suddenly he hears children's voices. However, he also realizes that he can no longer remain conscious. Sometime later, Araki suddenly woke up. He still couldn't see or hear. He only felt that he was wrapped in something warm and soft. He only felt the feeling of swallowing something. Araki felt that it was warm and the taste was sweet. It was like a fragile, shimmering piece of a faint memory. All he could do was suck greedily to satisfy the hunger he felt. His eyes were still closed. Araki was only thinking that it was time for him to check out his surroundings. Although he feels like he's trying to make his eyelids blink, but he can't even hold them. He can't even open them with his hands, because he can't move them freely. Araki waves his hands slightly and realizes that he can feel them. He thinks that it is somewhat similar to rehabilitation. However, if it is rehabilitation, there would be an observation by a coach or a doctor, but they are not there. He feels that he can hear sounds from outside, but they sound muffled. He feels as if the outside world has gone deaf. He's not sure if it's because his ears are blocked by some kind of headphones. Unfamiliar sounds sound like a foreign language. However, even so, he realizes that he cannot hear anything familiar in these words at all. However, he cannot continue his thoughts, because for some reason he feels that his body is very tired, although he did not move at all, which is why he cannot continue to remain conscious. Araki falls asleep again and wakes up after an unknown amount of time. This time, he is making every effort to finally open his eyes. He rejoices when he feels his eyelids lift, and if he continues, his eyes will open. After making every effort, Araki finally opens his eyes. The darkness around slowly dissipates, and Araki tries to focus his gaze, but sees everything in front of him rather dimly. Only the silhouette of an unfamiliar girl stands out. The girl, apparently noticing that he has opened his eyes, leans closer. Now Araki can see her face better. It's a pretty young girl who is staring at him with wide open eyes. Araki thinks about who this girl is. At this time, she suddenly rejoices at something. A warm smile appears on her face. She starts saying something that Araki can't make out. He thinks he probably shouldn't have done it. Immediately after that, Araki feels weak again, after which everything goes dark again. When he wakes up, he realizes that he was so surprised that he fainted. Once again returning to consciousness, he sees several more people around. At first, it occurred to him that they might be doctors or trainers, but what kind of strength they should have to lift an adult man. He even suggests that they may use some kind of power suit for transporting heavy military equipment, which may have already been developed, to transport the patient. Araki suddenly visibly stiffens when he feels an unusual sensation. He feels his body bending and realizes that these people are lifting him up. Sometimes he feels the feeling of flying. Araki visibly tenses up again, asking himself what it is. The people bending over him were closer now, and he could see the faces of the girl and the boy. Araki decides to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, only individual vowels began to come out. After this short episode, he feels heavy again and falls asleep. After some time, waking up again, Araki feels that his body no longer has the same fatigue, so he finally decides to look around. He is lying on the floor on a small cloth. His stomach is also covered with a small towel. Araki finally feels that he can move his arms and legs. He starts waving them around. Fear and surprise appear on his face. He desperately hopes that this is all just a dream, since he is in the body of a child. Araki sees a window in the corner from which he can see the sky. He sees that it is already dark outside. He thinks that it must already be night. He lifts his hand and sees a small child's hand in front of him. Suddenly, a memory comes to him. He remembers that he left work on his 50th birthday. Everything was as usual. Then, a cold wind with snow blew over him. Araki thinks about what happened next, but realizes that he doesn't know what happened after. With horror, he realizes that he does not remember what happened next. He even assumes that he died that day, but he is not at all sure exactly when it happened. The realization of what happened puts a lot of pressure on him, and out of desperation he begins to cry loudly, thinking only about why this happened. The girl sleeping next to him wakes up to his screams. She assumes a sitting position and looks wearily at the child. She opens her light nightgown and puts it to the child's bare chest, thinking that he is probably just hungry. However, she notices that he is not eating. Closing her nightgown back, she puts the child on his back and lifts his legs to check. The child continues to cry, so he picks him up and starts rocking him gently with a smile, softly singing lullabies to him. Hearing the melody of the lullaby, Araki stops crying, although tears continue to flow from his eyes. Suddenly, he realizes that he feels joy. Unexpectedly, he feels like he's been through this before. He remembers how he felt being in an unknown and soundless void, and realizes that he was in his mother's womb then. He understands that if this is the case, then this is a kind of rebirth. He looks with tear-stained eyes at the girl who is peacefully and quietly humming a lullaby to him, and realizes that if this girl is his mother, then she must be very happy. Araki remembers his wife asking what was more important to him, the company or his family. He couldn't answer that question. He remembers how his daughter offered him to rent another house, since there was no point in him returning home. Araki was not very pleased to hear this from his own daughter, whom he had raised. His family was broken up, there was no one else he could rely on, he lost his home. Araki realizes that he will most likely never return home. While he was thinking about it, he completely stopped crying, after which the girl put him back down and lay down next to him, falling asleep again. Having calmed down a little, Araki looks out the window again with tear-stained eyes. Realizing all that has happened, he realizes that he has no other choice but to stay in this world. He firmly decides that this time he will be happy, and that he will live happily with his new, loving family. If he was reborn, then from that moment on he decided to live for his family. Araki's mother was one of those who neglected their children, and his father was busy with work all the time. Of all his memories, there won't be a couple where his parents would be at home together. In order to escape this environment of complete loneliness, Araki decided to devote his life entirely to work. However, at the same time, he really wanted to create an ideal family after marriage, or at least hoped for it. After thinking about what is happening, Araki confidently comes to the conclusion that his current situation is God's punishment for failing to achieve this goal in his previous life. He has been in the new world for 6 months now, learning a little about his surroundings. During this time, he realized that this is not Japan. Besides, there are no electronics in any room. He assumed that this place was just far enough away from civilization. Feeling the walls, he realizes that this house stands practically on mud walls, and some of them are decorated with embroidered carpets. Araki rolls over on the floor, looking around the room and thinking that he needs more information. He notices a box in the corner and crawls towards it, wanting to find out what's inside, although he realizes that there is hardly anything useful inside. With a little effort, Araki opens the box and looks inside. The box contains only various colorful rags and threads. At some point, he notices something. Araki sees a girl he already knows peeking out of the doorway, who is watching him very persistently. Looking at him, she frowns, and Araki is confused about what he should do. It seems to him that the girl suspected something was wrong because he moved too much. After that, he smiles broadly, looking at the girl. The girl leaves, and Araki sighs with relief, as he did not expect this to work. However, after a moment, the girl returns and picks him up. Looking up, Araki sees that a young man was now standing next to her. The girl carefully puts the Araki on the floor. Looking at the girl and the boy, he thinks that they are both quite young. He also recalls that his children were young too. However, these two strangers to him are his parents. After that, the young man and the girl sit down in front of Araki and, with a smile, begin to speak incomprehensible words, holding out their hands to him. Araki does not understand what they are saying, but assumes that they want him to approach them. After that, he gets on all fours and crawls towards them. When he gets close enough, the young man picks him up and lifts him up. Both parents are smiling happily and saying something in an incomprehensible language. After that, the young man takes Araki back to where he was sitting. He returns to the girl, and they both start calling the child to them again. Araki desperately asks them to let him rest. After a while, Araki made indistinct sounds again, this time a little clearer than before. He realizes that his intonation is slowly improving over time. His mother, who was sitting next to him and was busy with something, draws attention to the fact that his son began actively trying to say something. She sits down in front of him and starts repeating the word picha, pointing at herself. Then Araki realizes that this word most likely means mom. He's trying to pronounce the word, but he's not doing well. He tries to pronounce it as best he can. At some point, he manages to pronounce the word clearly and clearly. Mom looks at him for a few seconds. After that, tears suddenly begin to actively flow from her eyes, scaring her son. She cries, hugging her son, who does not understand her reaction. Her husband comes into the room asking her something. She says something to him with tears in her eyes. After that, the young man points at her, looking at his son. Araki says, "Mom." After that, the young man points at himself with a smile. Araki looks at him with incomprehension, as he does not yet know how to say father. Because of this, the young man gets upset and leaves the room with a depressed look. Araki feels a little guilty and mentally apologizes to his father. The day he said picha had kindled the spirit of a teacher in his mother, and now Araki began to learn the language. Mom showed him a piece of paper with inscriptions and told him how to spell and pronounce soft towel. The lessons helped Araki begin to understand a little grammar. After his mother's words, he crawled over to a stack of towels and put one of them on his head. Thanks to the lessons, he now understands what his mother and father are saying. During his studies, he also learned that the word father is facha. Araki's father was incredibly happy when he finally heard his son calling him father. Suddenly, the door to the room opened abruptly. An unknown man entered the room, who was dressed in a large number of layers of various clothes. His face was covered by some kind of animal. Araki's father was standing behind him. Araki looks fearfully at an unknown person who is approaching him with rapid steps. Suddenly, he leans sharply towards the child, which is why the tip of the skull almost touches the child's face. Araki can't see the man's face under the mask. There is only darkness, from which only two eyes are visible, staring straight at him. The child gets even more scared and begins to tremble in fright. His parents address this man as Madam and ask a little excitedly if their son will grow up strong. Madam at this time examines the child from all sides, lifting him into the air by his legs, scaring him even more. Madam lets him go and tells the child's parents that despite the lack of swirling stars, life can be connected. Araki immediately crawls up to his parents' feet in fright. Madame bends down and strokes the child's head, saying that his new destiny is sanctification by mercy. After that, Madame leaves, finally saying that she is looking forward to the future. The mother gently lifts her son in her arms, saying that they were preparing for this, and yet he survived. She hugs her son with a smile and says that they will do it. The father says it doesn't matter what kind of child he is, they will take care of him no matter what. He tenderly hugs his wife and child and says that Megillah favors them. After the meal, the mother said with a smile that now they will celebrate the whole year since the birth of their son. At the same time, she calls him Dilly. She wipes Araki's mouth with a leftover napkin while he thinks about what she means. She sits her son down and says that they will have a feast tonight. After these words, Araki looks at his parents and sees that today they look a little more elegant than usual. More patterns appeared on the clothes, and they were also wearing jewelry. After that, the mother takes her son and puts him in a cloth wrapped around her body. She says it's time for them to go. Araki is curious about where they are going to go. As soon as the parents take their son out of the house, he sees the street for the first time. Their house looks like a simple two-story house from the outside. There is a low fence around it, and small flowers bloom in the courtyard. The house itself is almost completely surrounded by dense forest. Araki looks at the outside world in surprise while his parents carry him somewhere, talking to each other and laughing. Eventually, they come to a small hut. They open the door, and the father addresses a man named Vedas. In the hut, they are greeted by an elderly man with a beard, dressed in a simple robe and a tall headdress decorated with various fabrics. Two women were also sitting in the hut, one of them helping an elderly man to stand up. The parents put their son on a small cot in the middle of the hut. Vedas approaches the child and says that since he has lived for a whole year, it is time for him to continue living as a human being. Vedas turns to the two women who were sitting with him in the hut and orders them to prepare everything. One of the women approaches the child with a plate that was filled with a strange, dark-colored liquid. She dips her fingers in the liquid and smears it on the child's face, which scares the child. The bent women look at him with a smile, and Araki gets scared. He thinks he's been smeared with paint, which also smells vile of fish. He mentally turns to his parents, who are also smiling, and says that he is scared. After that, both women leave the hut. Vedas comes closer, stands over the child, and says that he, the child of Dia and Tina, was born into this world a year ago, during which time he has grown and developed. He says that Lee, the son of We, will become the legitimate son of Yes today. After that, Vedas looks at the parents and asks for the child's name. The father confidently replies that the child's name is Tidus. Vedas says that the child's name is Lee Tidus now. He turns to the child and says that today Lee has become Tidus, the son of Yes, and he is allowed to live on this earth. Vedas picks up a mirror and tells the child to let his eyes see this moment and burn it into his memory. He approaches the child with a mirror. Tidus looks at his reflection in fascination and sees that 3 stripes on his face, 2 on his cheeks, and 1 on his forehead were smeared with that unknown liquid. He frowns when he realizes that this is the first time he sees his face. Looking at himself and comparing his appearance with his parents, he realizes that outwardly he was very similar to his mother. Tidus touches the paint on his face and suddenly realizes that it is not paint, but blood, which explains the strange smell. After that, these people continued with a series of prayer-like words. In the end, they forced Tidus to drink a milky substance. Eventually, the celebration of his first year ended, and Tidus and his parents left the hut. His father tells him that V is a word that means Megillah and all the other gods. Mom tells him that the word Yes means them, people, and that from that day on, Tidus is officially their child. Tidus understands and thinks that this ritual is somewhat similar to the ritual of Shichigo-san. With a smile, Mom gently hugs her son, calls him a cutie, and happily says that his name is Tidus now. He is embarrassed by his mother's words and buries his face in her chest. Tidus repeats one of the words he heard earlier. His father thinks about it and says that the meaning of the word refisho will be a little difficult to explain. He tells his son with a smile that this word means a position that can be called the position of the head of the village. Tidus realizes that his father is the head of the village. He's a little surprised and thinks that this is a pretty high position. After that, Tidus wearily closes his eyes, falling asleep in his mother's arms, and thinks that it has been quite a long day. After some time, Tidus wakes up, already lying in bed at home, when someone gently pinches his cheek. He opens his eyes, sleepily and wearily. In front of him, he sees two unfamiliar silhouettes bending over him. Tidus opens his eyes completely and sees that two girls are sitting on either side of him. One of them has blonde hair, in which a small ornament is braided, something similar to the wings of a bird. The second one had dark hair and was wearing a headscarf. It has already been several months since the ritual at which he was celebrated as the Son of Man. Summer has finally arrived, and Tidus is constantly being chased by the little monsters that he named the two girls. These little girls followed him literally everywhere, calling him Tidus, obviously trying to pronounce his name, which they did quite poorly. Tidus and the girls were in a room with many other children who were happily playing with each other. The girl ran after Tidus and eventually knocked him to the floor, falling on top of him. He grunts painfully and tells them that it's hard for him. The girl with blonde hair is feral. She is the daughter of one of Tidus's father's childhood friends. She's about a month older than Tidus. She pulls him by the cheeks, and he thinks with displeasure that he is, in fact, not a toy. The second girl, who had followed Tidus everywhere with Ferial, was now standing aside and looking a little worried at how her friend was harassing the boy. This girl is Jessie. She was a little younger than Tidus in age. Besides being quiet, whenever Ferial bothered Tidus, she always attacked Ferial. As now, seeing that he is uncomfortable, Jessie gently pushes the fairy aside, which she is clearly not happy about. They fight for Tidus like for a favorite toy, but he's just afraid that they'll twist his joints like that, since both girls grabbed his hands tightly, clearly not wanting to let go, while both pulled him towards themselves. Tidus suddenly notices his parents among the adults, and when his mother turns her gaze on him, he mentally turns to her, asking for help. However, when she notices him, she just smiles at the way the children are playing and says that her son is quite popular. Tidus realizes with despair that it is useless to ask her for help. Then he decides to cope on his own and starts actively waving his arms with all his might so that the girls finally let go of him and moved away from him for some distance. After that, Tidus immediately runs to his father, who is sitting on the floor, as he can only rely on him now. He jumps on his father's knee and calls him. Looking at him, Dee just smiles amiably. Suddenly, he takes his son in his arms and carries him back to the girls, who are already joyfully pulling their hands towards him. Tidus is desperately wondering why he's doing all this. However, after a second, he realizes what it is that he was grumbling about. While Jessie and Ferial are sitting around him playing with dice, he looks out the window. He tried to find any chance to explore the world around him while playing with Ferial and Jessie. Looking out the window, Tidus thinks that, given that the climate in this area is quite measured, he, surprisingly, has not yet seen any signs of civilization. He understands perfectly well that usually such places are definitely inhabited by people, and no matter how far from civilization they would not be, somewhere at least one wire or telephone pole could still be seen. Tidus also thinks that even if they are not there, you could see a trace of a passing plane. He moves closer to the window and realizes that, as he thought, this place cannot be the land he knows. Tidus wonders if he has moved back in time or if this is the aftermath of the World War. He realizes that no matter how much he thinks about it, he still has no way to find out the truth. While Tidus is thinking at the window, his names are Ferial and Jessie. As soon as he looks at them, they both immediately start running towards him, each calling him to her, holding out their hands to him. Tidus immediately turns away and starts running, mentally asking the girls to give him a little break. Ferial and Jessie want to run after him, but suddenly a girl stands between them and Tidus, who screams at them to stop. After that, she stands confidently in front of the girls and looks at them sternly. She was a little taller than the others. Her long hair was braided in two lush pigtails, and there was a headband on her head. She was wearing a light dress. She starts scolding Ferial and Jessie, telling them that running is dangerous, and asks them not to run. They both get very scared, and the girl turns to Tidus. She leans over to him and asks if he's okay, smiling brightly. Tidus mentally thanks her, and the girl goes to the other children. This girl is Wellesley. She is 2 years older than Tidus, a brave girl. Suddenly, someone puts their hands on Tidus's back. Turning around, he sees Ferial and Jessie, who ask him for forgiveness for their behavior. They look guilty, and there are small drops of tears in their eyes. Tidus smiles and, stroking their heads, says that everything is fine. The girls are very happy that they have been forgiven and smile brightly. After that, he invites the girls to play together. However, a little later, an idea came to him. In the evening, at dinner, he asked his parents to give him some wood, and his mother, who carefully fed him with a spoon, asked with interest what he was going to do with it. Tidus replies that he is going to learn to read with his help. Then Mom tells him that it's too early for him. Tidus confidently tells her that he wants to play with everyone. His father remains silent, after which he told him that he would prepare as much leftover wood as he could. However, he also tells his son that the remains of the wood are quite expensive, so he asks him to be more careful with what he is going to do. Tidus smiles and agrees with his father. After some time, Tin brings his son all the extracted pieces of wood. She pours a small handful of thin planks onto the fabric and says she hopes it will be enough. Remembering that her son also asked her for a wand and a coal, she asks him to be careful when using them, which he agrees to. Tidus begins to swipe a piece of wood with a stick, intending to make notches on the planks. However, he quickly realizes that it takes a lot of effort with such a body. After making the serifs, he begins to add some charcoal to them. Mom, who was watching him, says that the writing is very beautiful and that Tidus is very good at it. After that, she says that it looks pretty hard and offers to help her son, to which he gladly agrees. Tin sits down next to him and helps his son to make serifs with individual symbols on each tablet. After finishing the work, Tin quite wipes the sweat from his face, and Tidus enthusiastically looks at the result. He looked at the tablets joyfully, thinking that he could teach with this. After that, he told his mother that he would go for a walk. She asked him to be careful. Tidus went out to play with Variel and Jesse. He showed them one of the tablets and said, "Quitza." They asked in perplexity what it was. Then Tidus pointed to the chicken standing nearby, and the girls understood the meaning of the word. After that, he pointed at various objects, then at a chair, then at the sky, and Farrell and Jesse repeated these words after him with almost correct pronunciation. At some point, Wellesley comes up to them and asks with a smile what they are doing. Tidus shows her the tablets and says it's a word game. He suggests that Wellesley play with them, and she agrees. Tidus's mother, watching the children from the window, thoughtfully says that it is so easy to understand. In the evening, during dinner, she showed her husband one of Tidus's toys. However, when he looks at the tablet, he realizes that a symbol representing the sun is painted on it. His wife tells him that she has never seen anything like it, and that Tidus asked her to make a couple, so she helped him. Dee wonders who taught his son this. Tidus ignores their conversation and quietly enjoys his dinner. He tells Tidus that his father is very inquisitive, and that his son most likely took after him. Then his wife asks if he remembers what he did when he was just 1 year old. Then, thinking about it, he replies that he remembers, but definitely mostly cried and most likely played. Mom and Dad both look at their son, and Tidus, feeling the gazes of his parents on him, begins to get nervous from such pressure. Then his father asks him where he learned these symbols. Tidus replies that he learned them in Dad's room. His mother asks him if he has seen such a game from someone else. He replies that his mother taught him, but he wanted to try to make it easier. Tidus says with a smile that it's because Mom is incredible, but the other kids haven't learned yet. After these words, his parents smile, especially his mother, who immediately joyfully hugs her son to her. She says she was worried about his premature development, but apparently she was just too worried, and if he's smart, then there's nothing wrong with that, and she hopes for his bright future. He also says that, on top of everything else, children's learning of new signs and words became their favorite pastime because it increased their frequency of communication with their parents. Dee pats his son on the head and says that it's all thanks to his efforts and that it's just wonderful. After that, he says that he would like to give his son a gift and asks what he wants. Tidus thinks about it and realizes that, although it is enough to increase the level of reading and education, something else is needed. Suddenly, he says he wants water. He tells his parents that he would like to go to a place where there is a lot of water and that he is hot here. His parents look at each other a little puzzled. The father suggests a river and says that you need to be careful and not go too far. My wife says the other mothers should go too, and while they're there, they can collect some river stones, and it won't be bad to go fishing. Tidus did not expect that everything would take on such a serious character. His father tells him that bathing is a game for older children, and his mother happily says that their son is smart beyond his years. Tidus is very nervous when he realizes that his parents misunderstood him, since he does not want to go to the water in order to take a bath with Wellesley and the others. Later, the whole family went to bed together. Tidus stroked his sleeping mother and, remembering what had happened at the table, thought that he had made his parents worry again. He thinks that if the level of education increases, they will be able to prevent fraud, and when he grows up, he will work with the children he grew up with, and he must know the language to be a decent and good head of the village. Although he understands that he is in a hurry, he also cannot just sit and do nothing. He thinks that with these thoughts, he will be able to move forward and further. By the river, he will be able to see marine products and tools with equipment. Many women were walking through the forest with their children, singing the song, "The all-merciful wind is coming," even if these fleeting sensations are scattered because of the impending storm. Some of them carried fishing rods. After some time, they finally arrived at their destination, and Tin tells her son, whom she was carrying in a handkerchief, that they had come to the river. Looking ahead, Tidus opens his eyes and mouth wide in surprise. Approaching the river, Tin sits down, allowing his son to descend. The river was not at all what he expected, as it was just huge, so wide that the edge could not be seen. He even thinks about whether it is really a river and not a sea. Not so far away, two huge mountains could be seen on the horizon. Tidus peered at the horizon, realizing that he could not even see the opposite shores, only the masts of fishing boats, and then only the tops. Thanks to this, Tidus realizes that this place is still a planet, since objects also disappear beyond the horizon, although it is still a mystery whether this planet is the Earth on which he grew up. Suddenly, someone is calling him. Tidus does not have time to react, as Tin, sitting behind him, takes off his light blouse with one light movement. Tidus immediately gets terribly embarrassed and automatically covers himself, surprised by something so sudden. However, looking at the other mothers and children who came with them, Tidus sees that their mothers also helped them undress for bathing, and also began to lift the hems of their dresses themselves. This makes him even more embarrassed. Tidus, with a thick blush on his face, looks at how women lift the hems of their dresses high and fasten them on their belts so that they can work more comfortably. After that, all the adults get to work. Someone sets up small logs on which they can sit, and someone built a fire from the found brushwood. Despite the fact that he is in the body of a child, Tidus still has the consciousness of an adult man, so seeing that all the mothers around are quite young girls, he does not understand where to look. His mother leans over to Tidus and curiously asks her son why he blushed so much. She asks if he is so embarrassed because everyone is wearing bathing clothes, and jokes about his earlier maturation. He just turns away in embarrassment, knowing that it's all because of the other children's mothers. Closing his eyes, Tidus waves his head, remembering that he came here today for a specific purpose, namely to observe the variety of fish products and equipment. Suddenly, someone takes his hands. In front of him are Fariel and Jessie, who were also dressed in two-piece bathing clothes, who smilingly invite him to play. They drag him along with them, and he thinks that at least they are in a good mood. Fariel and Jessie drag each other into the water. They stand closer to the shore, where the water is only waist deep. In the crystal-clear water, she can be seen floating by, and Tidus points at her, after which she is noticed by Fariel and Jessie. Fariel puts her hands in the water and starts waving her arms there, trying to catch a fish, but she can't. Looking into the water, Tidus realizes that it is much cleaner than he thought, and besides, it does not smell of anything. He decides to take a dip, after which he suddenly dips into the water with his head, while Jessie and Fariel look at him in surprise. After sinking to a shallow bottom, Tidus opens his eyes, after which he sees a beautiful river bottom in front of him. There are a lot of small fish swimming around, and short algae grow in bunches among the stones. Light oozes through clean water. Tidus sits on the shallow bottom of the river, having previously held his breath, and looks at a huge number of fish. He also notes for himself that no dangerous creatures like leeches are visible in the water. Having seen enough, Tidus emerges from the water, opening his mouth wide to breathe in fresh air. However, immediately after that, he hears his mother calling his name in a clearly displeased tone. Fariel and Jessie were held back by their moms while the girls struggled, wanting to dive into the water as well as their friend. Tin leans over to her son and sternly says that she was worried about him. She picks him up and pulls him out of the water, worriedly saying that it's too early for him to swim, and asks him not to put his head under the water anymore. Tidus guiltily looks down and apologizes to his mother. Mom looks at him with a soft smile. She gently puts her son back into the water and says that he is well-mannered, so he understands everything. She also tells him that it's still early and he has nowhere to hurry. Suddenly, one of the children sneezes softly. Everyone on the shore falls silent. After that, one of the mothers tells the others to gather all the children around the lit campfire so that they can quickly warm up and not catch a cold. After that, the children were seated on a log located around the campfire and also rolled up in warm towels. One of the mothers brought mugs of warm water to each of the children. Tidus brought the mug to his mouth, drinking a little, thinking it was probably boiled water. However, he also noticed that it was probably not ordinary water, as it had a citrus smell and salty taste. However, Farrell and Jesse clearly don't enjoy the drink that much and spat out their drinks in disgust, saying they were too sour. Tidus drinks with pleasure, thinking that it is probably too early for children to try citrus drinks. Seeing their friend happily drinking his drink, the girls lean over to him and ask in surprise if he really drinks it and if the taste is normal. Tidus doesn't understand what they mean. However, due to the fact that Tidus was drinking with pleasure, they decided that some other, more delicious drink had been poured for him. Tidus straightens his mug as he understands perfectly well that the same thing was poured for him. Under pressure, he still decides to give the girls a taste of his drink and pours them a drink from his mug so that they can personally see everything. Satisfied, they start drinking with pleasure. However, a moment later, they spit out the drink again with the same disgust, saying again that it is too sour. Tidus expected such a reaction, as he had warned them, but they did not listen. Tin comes up to the children and says they caught some fish. She suggests that everyone take a little rest and then start getting ready to return home before it gets dark outside. Night falls, by which time the whole family has already gone to bed. The parents had already fallen asleep, and Tidus, as usual, was thinking about everything that had happened. He thought that he had learned a lot today. Even on the way to the river, he had learned a lot. He found out that there was no sewer, but he also saw a building above the ground, so he assumed that there was an ordinary toilet with a hole. He also noticed that the fields are located in lowlands, as well as wide channels. The land is cultivated manually, without the use of artiodactyls like horses or cows. But the most important thing was that the river turned out to be bigger than he expected. Tidus reflected that, first of all, he needed to earn more money, and this applies not only to operating the village budget. Tidus thinks about how to store fish in order to increase its storage time, and thinks about smoking. However, after these thoughts, he suddenly feels very sleepy. He realizes that he has used too much energy today and goes to bed. The next day, while playing with Farrell and Jesse, Tidus tells them that they will compete today. Farrell and Jesse wonder what he means. He tells them that it's a competition to see who collects the most plaques. He randomly spread the tablets on the floor and asked his friends to find the right word. Seeing the misunderstanding of his friends, he suggests being the first to find the right word so that they can better understand what the essence of the game is. He asks them to say the words. Farrell thinks about it and says sheep. After that, Tidus quickly takes the tablet with this word and shows it to the enthusiastic Farrell and Jesse. After that, Farrell says the word hair, and Tidus quickly picks up the right tablet again. The girls enthusiastically say they want to try it too. They begin to actively play, looking for words such as mom, clothes, chicken, and chair. After playing for a while, all three children disassemble the entire mountain of planks. Tidus asks his friends who has the most cards and offers to count them. Farrell and Jesse start counting their tablets together. Tidus praises them in his mind. He happily thinks that in this way, he will be able to improve the level of education of children. They learn to count and follow the rules. Suddenly, he feels a strange sensation. Tidus felt his head suddenly spin for some reason. The girls and Tin noticed that something was wrong with him. Tin calls his son in fright when he suddenly faints. Tidus opened his eyes wearily. He sees the ceiling of their house in front of him and, looking out the window, sees that it is already dark outside. He wonders when evening has come. He's trying to get out of bed. Tidus decides to get up and take a sitting position. However, as soon as he assumes a sitting position, he becomes ill and he begins to cough actively. He remembers that he was studying with Farrell and Jesse when he suddenly felt unwell and fainted. He lay down again, trying to catch his breath from coughing. At that moment, Tin came into the room and called her son. Noticing that her son is moving a little, she leans over to him and gently touches his shoulder, excitedly asking if he is awake. When she sees that her son has finally woken up, she hugs him tightly, thanking the gods. Because of her strong emotions, she hugs her son very tightly to her, and Tidus wearily tells his mother that he is in pain. After that, she immediately puts her son down and apologizes to him. She says he must be thirsty, after which she takes a mug of water and brings it to his mouth to help him drink. After giving her son a drink, she starts calling her husband loudly. In less than a minute, his father's loud and fast footsteps are heard, after which he literally flies into the room. Tidus looks at him with a slightly worried expression. Seeing that his son is awake and looking at him, Dee stops for a second and just looks at Tidus. After that, he suddenly falls to his knees in front of his son. He He stretches out trembling arms to Tidus and hugs him tightly. Tidus says nothing, allowing his father to hug him while he continued to only repeat his son's name over and over again. A little later, the whole family gathered around the table for a serious conversation. Dee asked Tidus to listen to him carefully. He tells his son that he'd been unconscious for a whole day and a half. Tidus is very surprised that he slept for a whole day and a half, because he understands perfectly well that without modern medicine, it was very dangerous for him to lie unconscious for so long. Dee tells him that while he was unconscious, Madame came to them, who said that it was not a disease of the body at all, but a disease of the mind, and that she also said that the symptoms were similar to those when the mind empties and collapses. His father sternly tells him that because of everything that has happened, from now on, any exertion that requires great effort will be prohibited. Tidus can't believe what he's heard. The father continues, saying that studying or teaching other children will also now be banned, since it is, first of all, too early for him to even think about such things at his age. Tidus is visibly upset and looks like he's about to cry. He stubbornly tells his father that he wants to do this. However, Dee does not change his mind and tells him that he will no longer be able to do this. Then Tidus indignantly asks his father why he is forbidden to do this. After all, he understands that, although these things may be unnecessary for him, but it must be done. His father looks at him with a saddened look. He tells his son that children cannot take responsibility and that they have so far spoiled him with various things that seemed fun to him. However, he also tells his son that right now he needs to take care of things like gaining strength and playing games. Seeing that his father is firmly convinced of his words, Tidus decides to turn to his mother for support. However, he freezes when he sees his mother looking at him with a terribly saddened look. Dee tells Tidus that he doesn't know what motivates him, but still, he is his son, the child that came from Tin's womb. He seriously asks Tidus who in their right mind would want their precious child to be tossed between life and death. After his father's words, Tidus asks himself if he was really that self-sufficient. He understands that he has always been like this, even when he was a child in a previous life, and when he grew up, becoming an adult, even when he had his own family and children, and even when he was reborn in this world, having received a new family. Tidus realizes that he did all this just to be useful and to make his parents happy. However, he realizes that in this way, apparently, he wanted to make only himself happy. Tears appear in his eyes, and he realizes that he is offended because he was forbidden to do these things, or because he would not be able to make his parents happy, but because he did not take care of himself. He realizes that as a result of his selfish actions, his loving parents almost lost what they cherished most in the world, and this is the very thing that saddens him so much. Tidus finally realized that he had been a fool. He begins to crawl to his parents with tears in his eyes, realizing that no matter how far he went, he always thought only of himself and looked at others only from his point of view. Tidus clings to his father's knee and squeezes the fabric of his clothes in his small fists. He cries bitterly, looks guiltily at his parents, and asks them for forgiveness for making them worry. Dee gently strokes her son's head. Tidus realizes that he treated himself disrespectfully. Besides, he, in fact, did not respect the lives of other people who were worried about him. Tin breathes a sigh of relief. He asks himself how such a person could make at least someone happy, start a family, take care of children. It's incomprehensible to the mind, or to be more precise, it's sad. His father tells Tidus that he should rest. The next morning, Tidus wakes up, slowly opening his eyes. Mom gently strokes his cheek, wishing him a good morning and saying with a smile on his face that he is awake. You can see from her face that she is much better and that she finally got enough sleep. Tidus tells Mom that he wants to talk to Dad. Mom tells him that he can talk to him, but first they need to eat because he hasn't eaten for almost 2 days. After these words, a loud rumbling of the stomach is immediately heard. Tin looks at his son for a few seconds, after which he joyfully hugs him. After that, Tin takes his son to the room where Dee is already waiting for them at the table. Tidus greets his father. He wants to say something but restrains himself and does not say anything. Tin sits his son down at the table. His father tells him that he is glad that he is all right, and now it's time for them to have breakfast. Tin serves his son food. After that, Tidus begins to actively eat his breakfast. After finishing his meal, he turns to his father and seriously says that he wants to tell him something that he needs to know. However, he corrects himself and says that it is rather something that he has to report. The father asks his son to say what he wants to tell him. After that, Tidus thinks about it and realizes that he cannot explain reincarnation to them, and thinks about how to tell them the most clearly. He understands that they do not know Tidus's true identity. Definitely, he will have to take this guilt with him to the grave and live with it for the rest of his life. He understands perfectly well that this is not self-sacrifice. This is the true karma that he faced, like Araki Susumu, like Tidus, because he unknowingly, at birth, took someone else's life, taking its place. After these thoughts, he finally tells his parents that all this time someone has been telling him about many things, like a voice in his head. His parents look at him, puzzled. Tin asks his son what the voice was telling him. Tidus says the voice told him how to memorize symbols, or how to memorize words, and even how to make it more easily remembered. He understands that if you call it another person, it will be too difficult to explain. Then you can use the term divine voice instead. His father asks him since when he has been hearing this voice. Tidus replies that he has heard this voice all the time. After that, D slams his fist down on the table. He becomes enraged and says with displeasure that this voice apparently was what Madame was talking about his future, guided by mercy. D begins to tremble and asks if such things are not a curse for a little child. At the same time, he begins to lose his temper and even raises his voice. Tin tells her husband that he scares the child. However, Tidus only shakes his head understandingly and tells Mom that everything is fine. He apologizes to his parents for making them worry again. D's face shows sadness. He covers his face with his hand and says that, of course, he was worried. His son was carrying such an unbearable burden on his children's shoulders. He wants to say something, but Tidus puts his hand on his trembling hand. Tidus tells his father that if it wasn't for him, he wouldn't be here now, so he's grateful, and that he's just happy to be here with Mom and Dad, and thanks them. D covers her face with her hand again. Tin asks his son a little excitedly if he is still their Tidus, to which he replies that he is, and he will always be the same. After that, Mom hugs him tightly. She tells him that as long as he's alive, that's enough. Tidus clings to his mother in silence. After that, he turns to his father and says that he will no longer overwork himself, and that from now on he will speak to him properly. Tidus asks his father to help him. He understands that he needs help, and he needs his father to do it. He wonders why he has never been able to say such simple things all his life. Tidus tells his father that he wants to be happy together, and that he will be happy too, so he needs help. Tears begin to flow from his eyes again. My father says that, if so, he is right. D tells his son that he is sure he has mercy. He wants to ask something, but immediately stops himself and says he doesn't care. He says that as long as they can live happily together, everything will be fine. D clenches his hand into a fist and says he understands everything. He says that from now on, they will overcome all obstacles together as a family. Tidus walks up to his father and pats him on the back, thanking Mom and Dad again. Tidus hugs his father's back and says he won't force himself anymore. D lowers his head and a few drops of tears fall from his eyes. Tidus is sure that it is important for them to move forward as a full-fledged family. In the evening, they went to bed together. Tidus realizes that childhood memories are usually forgotten quite quickly, but this time it's different. His memories have been preserved since he was in the womb. Looking back, he realizes that he could not realize everything, but simply lived in absolute ignorance. And yet, he moved on with his family. A lot of things need to be taken with him, so he will not get lost anymore. And now they will live together and follow the path of family happiness, because he wanted it. Tidus falls asleep with a warm smile on his face, realizing that he is sleeping between his parents for the first time. D asks her son if learning to write is really that important. Tidus confidently replies that this will help him protect the village in the future, and that his work can be divided into several people. Tidus tells parents that if they build a school that teaches literacy and move towards progress where writing is needed, then the literacy rate will increase. After Tidus told his parents about his rebirth, they began holding family meetings to talk about the future. D says with a smile that he never thought he would learn new information about people from his son. The father gets up from the table and says that he understands that this is for the sake of the future. He pats his son on the head and says that they will try their best. All three of them understand that they need to unite together, like a real family, for the sake of common happiness. After some time, Tin, along with Tidus, as well as other mothers with children, came back to the river. The other mothers were busy, and the children were happily playing with the water. Tin and Tidus stood together in the water, apart from everyone. After doing something, Tin looked into the clear water with a smile and asked her son how long it should take. A week before, when Tidus was playing with his tablets, his mother brought him something he asked for. This turns out to be an oblong rectangular box made of wood. Tidus rejoices and enthusiastically says that this is a fish trap. Mom asks him what it means. Mom asks him if he needs it to catch eels. She says she doesn't think they will be able to eat eels because of their skeletal structure, and that the fisherman will let the fish go if he catches it. Tidus says with a smile that there are no problems, and suggests that Mom set a trap the next time they go to the river with the rest of the residents. Tin sighs, seeing how confident her son is, and decides to do as he asks. It takes several days since they set the trap, and finally the day comes when it needs to be taken out. Tin digs into the water, taking out a trap, and asks her son if she can open it. She pulls the trap, which has become a little heavier during this time, out of the water and carries it ashore to a small basket. She asks Tidus again if she can open the trap now, and he says he can. After that, a huge number of writhing eels with several small crustaceans fall out of the trap into the basket. Tidus looks at it with a smile, rejoicing at such a big catch. Tin is smiling too, but she looks more like she's frozen in sudden fright. Tidus anxiously asks his mother if everything is okay. Tin and Tidus take the eels they caught together and bring them home. Tin sighs tensely, saying that there would be no problems if there was only one eel, but there were a lot of them. Tidus looks at his mother and thinks that this must have been amazing to see for most people. Tin warily looks at a couple of eels in a basket in front of him and calls them tentacle-like something. Tidus agrees with her. After that, he takes hold of the eel's head with a napkin and says that he will cook it. Tidus, who was sitting in her father's arms, asks her to start and tells her not to touch her mouth or rub her eyes while cooking the eel. Tin thrusts the knife next to the eel's head, after which it abruptly stops squirming. After that, she gently runs along the thin and slippery body of the eel, holding it with her other hand. Tin is very focused, and her husband and son are watching her. Having cut the body of the eel across, Tin carefully runs a knife along the meat fibers, getting rid of the thin skeleton. She looks at her work quite contentedly and says it's very cute. She wants to wipe her face, but she can't, so Tidus asks her father to do it. Dee walks up to his wife and gently wipes away the sweat droplets with a napkin. They smile at each other sheepishly. After that, Tidus told his parents that they had 2 more eels to deal with. After Tin finished, she looked at the work done with a smile. Tidus called her amazing. Tin says it turned out just fine, and Dee says that when the village first appeared, they just ate the usual food, but now everything seems to change. The parents are admiring the raw eel, when suddenly the son tells them that now they only have to cook the eels, and that they are almost finished, so they should continue. While cooking eels, an appetizing smell begins to ooze out of the window located in the kitchen, which quickly spread around the area. After the heads and bones are salted, it is necessary to make a broth from water and barley to make barley porridge. The meat and liver are skewered and slowly fried without salt. After that, it is necessary to pull the skewer out of the meat and check its readiness by piercing it with a stick. The whole family looked at the prepared dishes with admiration, after which, after exchanging glances, they decide to start eating. Dee and Tin, after tasting a piece, are surprised to say that it is very tasty. Tidus also eats with pleasure, enjoying the crispy crust and soft meat. Dee says that this food is quite different from their usual dishes, and at the same time has a distinct taste and aroma. Tin says she wishes she had eaten something like this before. After tasting the liver, Dee says that the insides of the eel are also quite tasty, and Tin says that the eel is quite similar to fish since they can even eat the insides. After enjoying dinner, Tin tells her husband with a smile that they lost a lot if they hadn't tried this dish before. Dee says that no one could have known about it, since they themselves had convinced themselves that the eel was tasteless. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door. Opening the door, Tin sees several neighbors. They apologize a little shyly for bothering them and say that they came because they smelled something delicious. Thus, the delicious smell of cooked eel became the reason for its extraordinary popularity. Tidus's family lent eel traps to the rest of the villagers. They also charged a small tax on any catch except those claimed by the fishermen. Later, at one of the family councils, Dee was surprised to say that he could not have imagined that after that there would be so many excess food supplies. After the time when Tin and Tidus successfully tested the eel trap, they were available to the whole village, and due to the fact that people began to actively eat eels, the number of livestock began to increase rapidly. Renting eel traps has become a source of monetary profit, which in turn has increased the amount of finance they can now manage. Dee asked what they should do next. After that, D and his family go outside, where the head of the family heats up a small fire, over which there is a box with a door. After warming up the fire, from which clouds of smoke begin to emanate, D opens the door of the drawer and hangs several butchered eel carcasses for pay. He looks thoughtfully at the box and asks if this is what Tidus was talking about. The son confidently says that this is it, dried food cooked with smoke. D says it's true that fishing has become very popular in their village, and if they dry the excess, it will help them keep their food from going bad, as well as sell them to nomads, since river fish is a rarity for nomads. Tin happily says that it is because of this that the nomads will be happy to exchange with them. She hugs her son tightly and says that this is what Tidus expected, that he would be able to create such an incredible thing. Tidus is also happy, but also thinks that it was quite difficult. However, the carpenters were amazed by this. After a while, it was time to check the blackheads. D opens the drawer door, and 4 dried eels are visible inside. Tin says with a smile that they look very tasty and offers the family a quick lunch with them. After tasting a small piece, D opens her eyes in surprise. Tin feeds Tidus, thinking that dried food has such a deep color, and she is once again surprised that eel can really be such a delicious dish. She also tastes a piece and immediately says that it is incredibly delicious and that she likes it. She tells her family that they should offer this food to the rest of the residents, presenting it as a commercial product. After everyone in the village tasted the eel, after small adjustments in taste, Tidus's parents opened a business and began selling their dish. One day, D was informed that the nomads were approaching the village. After that, soon several nomads arrive in the village to buy everything they need in the village. One of the nomads tasted some dried eel and immediately said admiringly that it was incredibly delicious. It was obvious from him that he was delighted. D is happy about it. He tells the nomad that dried eel will not spoil for a long time and that it costs quite a lot. However, before he can announce the price, the nomad puts a huge bag of money on the table. D stops talking. The nomad confidently tells the head of the village that even though the eel is quite expensive, he wants to buy as much as he can without even haggling to lower the price. After successful trading, the nomads leave the village, waving happily to the villagers. Tidus stands next to his father, who silently looks after the departing nomads. Still trembling from shock, he says that he planned to bargain, but did not even think that they would take the goods for such a price. Tidus thinks his father has clearly underestimated their appetite. He happily tells his father that this moment showed them that there is a demand for dried fish here. D tells her son that he is right and suggests that they continue to actively expand their trade. After some time, some villagers were preparing to leave their home for a short time. Tidus, sitting in his mother's arms, wishes his departing father good luck. D finally waves happily to his wife and son. The nomads apparently spread rumors about dried food, and because they received orders from other villages to bring as much food as possible, the village sent a group led by D. Tidus is a little sad because he feels lonely after his father left. Tin looks after her departing husband. She hugs her son to her and says that he shouldn't worry because D is strong, so he will definitely come back. She tells her son that they will wait for him, after which she turns and carries her son towards the house. Tidus looks at his mother sadly and asks himself how he can protect this village. He knows that his father left some manpower in the village, but the people he left with were the most experienced, which is why the number of warriors in the village decreased. Tidus understands that if this continues, then people with evil intentions may appear in the village. At this time, an unknown person is silently watching the village from the forest. While the children were happily playing together, Tidus was sitting on the porch, apart from everyone. With special attention and accuracy, he quietly and slowly plaited 3 thin threads into a pigtail, placing their other end under a stone so that the threads would not unravel. He was so engrossed in his occupation that he did not even notice how 2 children slowly began to approach him from behind. Suddenly, Farrell and Jesse rushed at him with hugs, shouting that they had caught him. Farrell leans over to Tidus curiously and asks what he's doing. Tidus, in turn, bent down, as it was hard for him because of Farrell. He turns to the girls and says he's making guns. The girls look at him in surprise for a few seconds, after which a strong interest and joy appear in their eyes. Tidus continues to work on the weapon for a while, after which, when finished, he wipes the sweat from his face. He shows the girls a ready-made weapon consisting of 2 pieces of intertwined thread and fabric. The girls ask what it is. Tidus proudly spreads out his invention, thinking that he managed to make a sling. He asks the girls if they want to see how it works, and they agree. Tidus, of course, knows about the existence of a bow, but he can't do everything quickly, unlike a sling. He takes a small stone from the ground and puts it in a cloth. After that, Tidus takes hold of the ropes, closes the stone in a small bag, and begins to actively rotate the sling, gaining speed. After that, he releases one of its ends, which causes the stone to fly out of the fabric and fly forward a little, after which it falls to the ground. Tidus, pleased with his ingenious invention, looks at his friends, whose eyes show admiration. Other mothers and children are also fascinated by this, after which the mothers turn to Tin and enthusiastically ask to tell them how she did it. Even with the strength of a child, you can use a sling as a full-fledged weapon. Tin tried to explain to others that this was not her idea at all, looking sternly at her son. Evening comes, and after dinner she chastises her son and tells him that he should tell her about such things first. Tidus guiltily looks down and apologizes to his mother and says that he just thought he needed to do something to protect himself. Tin relaxes his gaze and smiles softly. She tells her son that he is right. Since Dad and the others are not in the village now, he was just worried about the villagers being able to protect themselves. Tidus still looks a little sad. Then Tin tells him that Mom knows how to use a sword because she has to be strong. Tidus looks at his joyful mother with a smile. The next day, while Tidus was still sleeping peacefully, Tin suddenly runs into his son's room and loudly wakes him up. Tidus slowly opens his eyes and looks at his mother, puzzled. However, after getting dressed and entering the living room, he freezes in shock, not understanding what is happening, since many guests are already waiting for him in the living room who came to talk to him. After they heard about the sling, the elders who were no longer engaged in farming came to them. Tin brought tea for the guests, who watched with interest as Tidus made the cloak, asking him various questions. Tidus was a little confused, as the heads of the family really strained him. After that, under the guidance of Tidus, the elders learned how to make slings themselves. After some time, the children also came to the house. Several of them were given raincoats in their hands. 2 children swing slings with all their might and launch stones that only fly a short distance and fall to the ground. Jesse happily hugs his grandfather, who thoughtfully said that Jesse said it was a weapon, but it also doesn't look simple. Then he asks to give it a try, after which he takes the cloak and swings with all his might. After the stone flies out of the sling, it flies at a much higher speed and crashes right into the trunk of a tree. Tidus looks at it in fright, and the other elders decided to try it too. 30 minutes later, all the shots left a small mark on the tree, peeling off the top layer of bark. Tidus and Prince expected veterans to figure it out quickly. He no longer doubts that with the help of a cloak, it will be possible to injure someone. While the other children and elders were busy, one of the elders approached Tidus and addressed him as the third. Tidus turned to him, but he wasn't sure if the elder was talking to him. The man asks him why it is necessary to create weapons at this time. Tidus responds by saying that autumn will end very soon, so wolves and stray dogs will start coming out of their hiding places. He tells the elder that they must get rid of them together, or it could lead to dangerous consequences. Then the elder says it would be nice to make more of these things. After that, Jesse takes him by the hand and takes him away to play. Tidus silently looks at the others and thinks that he is sure that if something happens, it will happen in winter at the most inopportune time for farmers. After some time, Tin decides to call the elders together with Tidus. The elders sit in a circle so that each of them sits facing Tin and Tidus. The elders are actively discussing that people have been spotted near the village, but they are not sure if they are thieves. One of the elders says that the number of people is from 50 to 60 and that they are armed, but no one has seen them with bows or arrows. Someone says that the village has been on the rise lately, all thanks to advanced fishing and good sales, and that's why they stand out. One of the elders says that those people who are now surrounding the village were most likely waiting for the moment when the men would leave it. The elders start to get angry and even ask if the village head D knew something like this was going to happen. They even begin to suspect him that he knew everything, but still chose to leave the village for money. Tidus is uncomfortable with such accusations against his father. He calmly tells them that there is no chance that the head of the village knew about this, because if he had known that everything would end like this, he would not have left. He confidently says that his father is not a traitor. One of the elders starts to get angry and wants to say something to the child, but Tin does not allow it. She doesn't say anything at all, but only looks at the elder menacingly, after which he gets a little scared and falls silent. Tidus looks at his mother in surprise, as he had never seen her so angry before. One of the elders says that first they should decide who will take over the management. Many people immediately offer their candidacy, but suddenly Tidus raises his hand and confidently says that he will do it. Tin and the elders are surprised by his words. After Tidus announced that he would lead everyone, the elders began to whisper among themselves. One of them thoughtfully asks Tidus what he thinks their enemies want. Tidus says that it is quite possible that these enemies want to get what their village recently received after successful trade with the nomads, or to be more precise, they want money. However, he also says that one possible option is that they want to learn how to cook eels and dry them. He confidently says that the reason may be that this knowledge will give them incredible benefits. The elder responds by saying that if the enemy knows about their village, then they are most likely well informed. He assumes that someone from the village provides the enemies with all the necessary information. After these words, one of the men visibly tensed up. The elder continues, saying that no matter what the enemy's goals are, at the moment the village is in a vulnerable position, so they can easily take the lives of everyone in this village. He asks Tidus what countermeasures they have, since the enemies have about 50 armed men. Tidus confidently replies that they are going to use a sling. He explains to the elders that adults can use it to defend gates and walls, and even children can use it to ambush or attack enemies from behind. Tidus says that the most important thing is the fact that everyone can take part in the protection of the village without risking their own health, which is why no one will have to go out the gate. One of the elders is smiling. Everyone was clearly inspired by these words, happily saying that Tidus's idea was quite interesting and that they did not expect anything less from Dee's son. The elders collectively choose him as the interim head. The men actively encourage each other to war, enthusiastically saying that the enemy will not attack their village until dawn. However, one of the elders does not look so happy, but on the contrary, tense. It was he who remained sitting in the living room when, after the meeting, most of the elders rose from their seats and left the house. Tidus tells his mother that he wants to say something to her and asks her to bend down so that his words cannot be heard. She bends down and listens to what her son whispers in her ear and says that she understands everything. After that, she quickly leaves the room. Left alone with the man, Tidus turns to him and asks why he is not preparing for war with the others. The man begins to panic and tries to justify himself somehow, but cannot say anything in response. Tidus approaches him and says that in this raid, some traders were leaking information about the village. He looks down at the man sitting there and asks if he knows anything about it. He stutters and says he doesn't know anything. After that, he immediately gets up and starts running away quickly. Tidus immediately calls his mother. Tin suddenly appeared at the doorway, telling the man with feigned concern that his face was very pale. She stands in front of him with a friendly smile and a long belt and asks if he would like to relax for a minute. The man gets scared and freezes in place with fear, realizing that he has fallen into a trap. A few days later, when Tidus woke up early in the morning, he found that someone was sitting next to his bed and waiting for him to wake up. When he opens his eyes, he sees Farrell's father in front of him and asks where his mother is. The man replies that Tin is now engaged in brief informing the villagers at the gate. He sits down with his back to Tidus and says that he will carry him on his back now. He helps the sleepy boy to climb on his back. They pass by the living room where the children were playing as usual. Farrell and Jesse notice the father of the ladies in waiting and Tidus passing by and joyfully call their friend. He tells his friends that it's safe here, so they'd better stay here along with everyone else. He waves goodbye to his friends and says he's leaving. Jesse and Farrell look out from behind the door and also wave goodbye, asking their friend to be careful. All over the village, everyone is actively preparing to repel an enemy attack. Papa Farrell brings Tidus to the right place, namely to a rather large tent in the middle of the village, and tells him that the opponents are already preparing for battle. He gently strokes the head of the smiling Tidus and says that he will leave it to him. After that, he leaves, saying that he will now return to his post. Tidus waves goodbye to him and thanks him for his help. Tidus enters one of the large tents, calling for his mother. She was talking to several residents at the time. When she sees her son, she goes up to him and, sitting on her knees, gently hugs him. She reminds him that she asked him to stay at home. Tidus lets Mom go and confidently says that he is now replacing Dad, which means he cannot sit in the rear. He also tells Mom that they are counting on a quick battle, so they must attack first. Tin already wants to say something in response, but decides to trust his son and let him participate. An elder enters the tent and asks everyone else if they are ready to launch an attack. After that, the residents gather to listen to the interim head of the village. Tidus stands behind a tall box and asks everyone to listen to him. He understands that it doesn't matter how much their head of the family told them, but it's probably not easy to obey a child, but they have to trust him. Tidus climbs onto the box with a little difficulty so that he can be seen better. He climbs onto the box. Tin is already reaching out to his son to help somehow. However, he confidently stands on the box. He tells the residents that everyone has someone important to each of them and that they all love this village. Tidus says that his father wants to enrich this village and make their lives happier, but if some people want to take away their housing, then the question arises whether they will allow this to happen. He says that they need to protect the village, and that Megillah will give glory to those who will bravely fight. Tidus loudly declares that they will definitely win. The residents enthusiastically raise their hands in the air and shout about victory. Tidus raises his hand in the air and orders everyone to prepare for battle. The enemy cavalry is heading towards them, so this is the perfect moment. After receiving permission from Tidus, Tin orders the gate to be opened. The quiet, peaceful life in the village has recently been interrupted. Once in a vulnerable position, the settlement was surrounded by enemy troops. Therefore, taking the leadership into her own hands, Tin ordered the gate to be opened, thereby starting resistance. Gradually, after the order of the wife of the head of the village, the gates began to open in front of the approaching enemies on horseback. The appearance of the passage to the territory stunned and excited the unexpected guests. Delighted with the perfect opportunity to enter enemy territory, the men rode straight at the gate. Despite the fears and doubts expressed by one guy, the riders continued to move forward. The blonde warrior was encouraged that he did not pay much attention to the actions of the villagers. He assumed that people were just opening the gates to the village as usual. He viewed such a situation as an ideal chance for an attack. The riders were rapidly approaching the gates of the settlement, leaving only a cloud of dust behind them. Tin and Tidus had been watching all this time and waiting for the best time to retaliate. Waiting for the right moment, the hero warned his mother about this. Tin listened to her son and his decision. She immediately gave the order to start firing. With a confident movement of her hand, she urged all the villagers to attack the attackers. Tin was determined. At the same moment, a lot of slings began to spin in the air. Suddenly, the sky in front of the riders was completely covered with rocks. A whole pile of hard stones was rapidly flying to the ground from a height. Raising their heads and looking at what was happening, the attackers were shocked and did not expect such a turn. Noticing the attack, the guys did not have time to come to their senses. While they were standing in place, the stones managed to reach them. And at the same moment, most of the enemies were hit on the heads, and not only. Also at the same time, the horses of the riders began to gallop from anxiety and fear. After the guys could not cope and stay in the seat, they fell to the ground. A lot of damage was done. The opponents couldn't move. Taking advantage of the moment of helplessness of the enemies, the villagers surrounded them. As soon as people reached the wounded guys, they began to grab them by their clothes and drag them along. The guys were unable to take any action in response. Thus, the guys from the vanguard were taken into custody. Without wasting a second, the villagers dragged the trapped enemies into their territory at a fast pace. The civilians acted in an organized and fast manner. As soon as the riders were inside, the gate was closed. While the rivals were in poor condition, the villagers decided to tie them up for safety, thereby immobilizing a number of enemies. The horses were also driven inside, where they stood next to the guys under a tree. The men who took part in the defense of the village quickly tied up the attackers. However, despite their words about the ease of the case, sweat broke out on his forehead. In the end, the men were happy with the work they had done. However, another man sharply rebuked the people who were overjoyed early. He menacingly reminded his tribesmen that the war had just begun and they should not relax. At this time, the next crowd of warriors on horseback was rushing rapidly towards the village gate. A huge number of horsemen again plunged the field into a fog of rising sand. The advance of the enemies demoralized the population of the small village. Despair and fear could be seen on the faces of the residents. There seemed to be tension in the air. At this time, Tidus was internally calming himself. He reminded himself that he was already 50 years old. In addition, he has experience in managing 6 branches and 500 people. War and management, according to the hero, have a lot in common. Moreover, it is obvious that things like morale are important because they motivate people to keep acting. While Tidus was thinking, one of the villagers shouted a warning to his tribesmen with enough enthusiasm to make them look at the attackers. The man began to speak very sarcastically about the enemies who went to war with them. He was clearly inspired to strike back. At this time, Tidus was incredibly glad that someone had been found who would calm everyone down and give people hope. Then Tin skillfully gave the command to the prepared warriors to strike back. The men quickly unwound the cloak. Once again, a barrage of stone strikes rained down on the warriors on the other side of the gate as they continued their advance. As before, the enemies could not withstand the force of the blow and began to fly off their horses. Looking at the whole unfolding situation, the hero was relieved to conclude for himself that numbers decide both in war and in management. By their actions, the villagers were able to reduce the number of opponents to 1/3. At this moment, the men, inspired by their progress, intended to leave the gate, so they asked to open it. They thought that they no longer needed a large amount of strength to fight against opponents. On a wave of joy and success, men on horseback rushed to pursue their abusers. Tidus, who noticed all the commotion, was worried that many were ready to go into battle without his orders. He was excited that the guys were on guard. He wanted them to warn them not to be so careless. However, he didn't have time to say anything. His attention was caught by his mother, staring intently and in surprise at something ahead. She froze in shock on the spot. Tidus couldn't figure out what was going on. It turned out that the men, led by D, had returned to the village from a mission. The appearance of the village head became more and more distinct. He was rushing to help his family and the village. D's long-awaited return was welcomed not only by Tin, but also by all the residents of the small settlement. Everyone was happy that the guys returned at the right moment after a long absence. D commanded all the guys riding on both sides of him. He ordered them to surround the enemy from 3 sides. He also ordered that the enemies not be allowed to approach the village. Quickly and synchronously, the team gave an answer and took action. The military, after being attacked, were physically unable to continue the fight. Many did not even get up from the ground. Despite all the efforts, the opponents did not manage to escape. The troops quickly overtook them. After surrounding all the enemies, D pulled his sword out of its scabbard and began to threaten them. He warned the attackers of his village so that they would never dare to threaten his village again. Being completely defeated, the enemies only sat quietly and obediently or lay on the ground. They were very scared, and sweat broke out on their faces from fear. Clenching their teeth, they could no longer utter a word in response. The villagers, watching everything, began to chatter. Among everything, one could hear that people were glad that everything was over, and they managed to defeat the enemy. The entire population began to rejoice and shout about the victory. The morale of the people has risen. Everyone started congratulating each other with such joy. Behind everyone stood the family of the village head. They also looked at him enthusiastically. From the battlefield, D, who was sitting on a horse, sent a very gentle and kind look towards his son. His whole face spoke of the joy and pride that filled his chest. Tidus, smiling brightly, continued to look admiringly at his father. At night, D took a bath. Entering the room to the household, he said that he was surprised that the village was attacked by armed detractors whom he had never seen before. D then went on to say that the next day they should decide what to do with the opposing attorneys. Kneeling down, D hugged his son very tenderly with all his love. He thanked him for his hard work. The father praised the main character for doing a great job. After hearing the words of gratitude and praise addressed to himself, Tidus was no longer able to hold back his tears. He blushed all over with embarrassment. He was glad that he could make his father proud of him. D, without releasing his own son from his embrace, continued to calm him down. Very sweetly, he told the boy that he hadn't changed at all. After the main character calmed down, the whole family went to the bedroom to fall asleep together. They lay down on the bed. The parents hugged their son from both sides, so Tidus's family fell asleep after a hard fight. The enemies were a nomadic community and distant relatives of the traitor. For the nomads, the horse was a lifelong partner and property. The most humiliating thing for them is to tear off the saddle and cut off the horse's mane. Just because they went to war on the village does not mean that all the inhabitants wanted them executed. The injured party has made many demands. Besides, considering that the horse is like a second life for a nomad, they were dishonored or punished. Before the opponents left the village, D ordered them never to return to this village again. Hitting the square, D released the nomads. They quickly rode away somewhere far away, leaving behind only a shroud of sand. After seeing off his opponents, the village head wanted to rest. However, he was interested in why he found a tied-up man in their kitchen who was a traitor. He was removed from his position as head of the family, and everything got better. One day, Tidus was happily playing outside. Noticing his parents, he happily invited them to spend the day together. He announced that he would go outside to play. However, he was puzzled by the embarrassed look of his parents. Suddenly, Farrell and Jesse came running after Tidus, who wanted to play with the main character. They were inspired. The boy asked what they would like to play. Confidently, the girls pulled out an object and said they wanted to play with a sling. While the children were rejoicing, an uncle came up to them who said that for them the sling was a strong weapon. He also shared his idea that children should start using it from an early age to get used to it while playing. He added that it would also be useful in hunting wolves. Although it confused him, he couldn't think about it for a long time, as the pleased girls grabbed his hand and dragged him to play with them. In the end, the main character was glad that he was able to protect his happiness. It's been a couple of months since that battle. The weather was gradually changing. That's how winter came to the village. It was getting very cold every day, but only the main character's family had a fireplace. Despite their desire, they cannot simply install fireplaces in all other houses, as there is simply no money for this. That's why I'm trying to make charcoal. Thanks to Tidus's instructions, a wooden structure was installed on the street. The logs were laid out in a certain order, creating a circular hill, on top of which a small wooden stick stood in the center. One of the villagers who took part in the construction reported that the logs had been successfully installed. Looking at the main character and his mother holding him in her arms, he asked what he and the guys should do next. Tidus continued to make recommendations. First, he told the guys to cover the log structure with foliage. After that, they had to set fire to the dry grass in the foliage. After that, smoke spread, which warmed the guys. When the guys finished the assembly and followed all the instructions of Tidus, they asked if they had done everything correctly. Everyone, including the main character and his mother, stood around the campfire waiting. Two guys, after they had completed the work, stood near the foliage, from which warm smoke emanated during the burning, warming the frozen guys. Gorenje. They enjoyed that warmth. For the safety of everyone, the hero explained that a fire was burning under the foliage. All that was left for the guys during the production of charcoal was to keep an eye on the fire at night. As morning came, Tidus was already looking forward to the result he had achieved. Full of enthusiasm, he told people to dig out what was inside under the foliage. At the same moment, with the help of an agricultural tool, the guys began to dig. Using wooden hose, the guys continued to gradually clear the area, while Tidus and Tin watched the whole process. Wave after wave, and the guys were already getting closer to the goal. Helping with their hands, they pushed the leaves aside. After clearing, the team found in the depths of the foliage the very logs that created the structure. However, the wood looked different. It was possible to notice that not only the color, but also other details had changed dramatically. Tin had already taken a small piece, which had been much larger before. She was amazed that the wood felt like stone. At this time, the main character stood and was proud of the result achieved. After the remaining charcoal was dug up after Gorenj, the main character, accompanied by his mother, returned home. Once at home, Tidus and Tina continued testing the extracted coal. The girl carefully, under the guidance of the main character, shifted the coals into a special device with the help of Chinese sticks. After completing all the steps one by one, Tin followed her son's instructions. The girl looked serious and focused. She took the kettle and put it on the iron support that separated the charcoal from the kitchen appliance. After all, they waited for a while until steam started coming out of the spout of the kettle. Tin and Tidus rejoiced at their little victory. They were able to get hot water in this way. Tina was just overjoyed. She looked at the charcoal with surprise and joy in her eyes. Looking at him, she was glad that now it would be very easy for them to boil water, which is so necessary in the cold season. Admiring the new invention, Tina began to list the advantages that she had noticed. Charcoal does not produce much smoke and burns longer. It does not get dirty if it is stored at home. In addition, it can replace a fireplace. The joyful girl was all beaming. She shared her impressions. She said that she was initially skeptical, as charcoal resembled stone. Despite the bias, she was able to admit that it was very convenient anyway. After completing all the tests, Tina and Tidus decided to please the entire population of the village with their discovery. They went to deliver charcoal to the others. One morning, during the morning bathroom procedures, Tina and Tidus were greeted by D. He wished them both a good morning. While Tidus was washing, D was waiting for his turn. He shared his opinion. He said that he always thought that hot water in the morning was a luxury. He said that once they get used to it, it will be difficult for them to give up such comfort. However, Tin, who was holding a towel, approached her husband and added that they could also use heated water to wash dishes. The girl was obviously glad of such an innovation. She wanted to show everyone else in the village this. When Tidus finished washing, his mother began to wipe his wet face with a soft towel. The hero looked very happy. The changes in his life clearly pleased him. After Tin wiped her son's face, she picked him up and took him to brush his teeth, leaving D washing himself with hot water. Unexpectedly, the main character's attention was focused on a small creature unknown to him, which was crawling through the fallen snow. Tidus was clearly not ready for such a sight, which is why he was surprised. Then, pointing at the creature, he immediately asked Tin what it was in their yard. His mother immediately looked in the right direction and noticed that they had a cute little animal called Fanuya. Such information drove the main character even more into a dead end. His eyes widened and his mouth opened in surprise. He didn't understand what a Fanuya was. A small, white animal, outwardly resembling a long-haired breed of dog, prettily moved its tail from side to side and barked. The next moment, the white puppy was already jumping around the guys, winding circles. The cute look of Fanui made stars sparkle in Tidus's eyes. He just watched and wondered. Then Tin took Fanui in her hands and began to examine him. Looking at her new friend, she concluded that this animal had just been born. The main character, bursting with interest, sat next to him and watched with interest, asking his mother. Tin and Tidus enthusiastically continued to play with the puppy. At this time, someone approached them from behind. Someone, approaching Tina and Tidus, kept calling someone named Rin. Looking at the guests who came, Tidus recognized the girl as his friend named Farrell, and behind her stood her mother, Jessie, and her mom. Farrell looked very scared. She was running towards Rin. After finding and reaching her pet, Farrell picked up Fanui. Her mother, in turn, apologized for the inconvenience. It turned out that Rin was born only 2 days ago, and Farrell, all this time after birth, tirelessly asked her parent to show her the dog. Therefore, at the moment, she can't break away from Fanning. Suddenly, she offered Tidus a look at the other 3 puppies she had brought with her. Farrell was beaming brightly with joy, and the puppies looked out of the box with more pleasure. The fairy's mother explained that they were looking for people who could take care of the 2 puppies, as they were not able to take care of all of them. Then Jessie's mom added that she and her daughter decided to take one into their care. After looking at the whole situation, Tidus turned to his mother. He asked for permission to get them a puppy. Tin whispered to her son about the difficulty of keeping such animals. She asked if her child knew how hard it was to look after them. At that moment, Tidus snuggled up to his mother and whispered in her ear that they needed to get along with their mothers. When she heard this, she was amazed by her son's proposal. She cast a confused glance in the direction of her son. Then, resigned to the situation, she closed her eyes, as if preparing and setting herself up for further. At the sewing moment, she abruptly stood up and, with a smile on her face, agreed to the offer to purchase 1 puppy. She looked very proactive, as if nothing had happened before. The next moment, the children and mothers split into groups. The children looked at their new friends and told them who they liked the most. Tin kindly invited the girls' mothers to visit them and have tea inside. When the children were playing outside with the puppies near the house, someone's figure was approaching them. Tidus paid attention to the guests who came and began to look at them. The main character took a closer look at the men, but their appearance was unfamiliar to him. He didn't know them at all. One of them approached the boy and ducked down. He greeted the hero and asked if he was Tidus. The stranger was smiling very broadly at the child. The man asked the child if his father was at home at the moment. It was a bright, sunny day outside. There were bare trees around the house. White clouds in the sky covered the blue expanse. On such a day, an unfamiliar blonde man came to visit the parents of the main character. Dressed in traditional clothes, he was sitting at a table in the house with a mug of tea with D and Tin. They were chatting sweetly together. All this time, hiding behind the corner of the doorway, Tidus and his puppy watched the company's interactions. He was interested. At one point, his father noticed him. D called his son over and introduced him to a new acquaintance. Tidus, in the company of a puppy, hurriedly and joyfully ran up to his parents. The new acquaintance turned out to be a distant relative of the royal family named Sifa. D said that when he, Tin, and Sifa were in the capital, he was their friend. Tidus expressed his gratitude to their guest. Sifa, in turn, greeted the baby and thanked him for calling his father for him. A new acquaintance very amiably ruffled the hero's hair and stroked him. Looking at Tidus, Sifa compared his appearance to his mother, saying that he looked exactly like her. Then, very playfully, blushing and gesturing that it was a secret, he added that he was also his dad. He revealed that in his early years, he and Dee were rivals for Tina's heart. Immediately after these words, Tidus exchanged glances with his parents. However, they only looked away in embarrassment. There was an awkwardness in the air. The hero only had to guess what kind of relationship his parents had with the royal family. Tidus then casually asked Dee and Tin what they had been talking about with Mr. Sepha. Dee said that they were just discussing the main hobby of their village. That is, it was about the fish that they smoke and sell. Dee shared the news that rumors about their secret dish had reached all the way to the royal family. Since their village has normalized a new source of profit, the government will soon provide the head of the village with a new position. Despite his father's explanations, it was difficult for the main character to accept the information received. Tidus did not understand exactly what position his father would be offered as the head of the village. Noticing Tidus's puzzlement, Dee immediately gave an explanation. He said that, in simple words, it is like the position of the head of the village under the direct supervision of the royal family. In addition, Dee added that if such village heads go to the castle, they have the right to a personal audience. But, despite such a tempting prospect, this kind of proposal has pitfalls. The problem is how the royal family provides the position. They are sending troops to the village. Moreover, in addition to the troops, there will be observers and messengers. There are 60 people in total, whose care will fall on the shoulders of the village population. Tidus reflected that this state of affairs was not advantageous for the village. Unexpectedly, Dee added that at the same time his workload would increase, so he would be forced to hire about 30 officials. This news pleased the main character, whose eyes shone as soon as they heard the news. Tidus began to think about the impact that the appearance of officials on their territory could have. Immediately, he figured out a scenario where the newly arrived nobility would be able to teach the villagers, and, therefore, the possibilities of their village will expand significantly. Having figured out an approximate plan of action in his head, the main character invited his parents to accept the offer and make their dreams come true. Upon hearing the child's statement, the three friends were shocked. There was a ringing silence in the room. Dee, Tin, and Sifa were only thinking about what it meant. The main character, full of enthusiasm, began to cheer up his father and say that he would be able to cope. He fervently said that his father, as the head of the village, would be able to become the one who would lead the people to success. This statement left everyone present even more perplexed. The thoughts of adults simply could not concentrate and realize what had just happened. After spending time with his friends, Sepha thanked them and expressed his joy that he had delivered the royal message. Saying goodbye to the main character's family, the new acquaintance was all beaming and smiling brightly. Dee very tiredly informed his friend that he had a lot of worries. However, he assured Sepha that he would think about the proposal of the royal family. Suddenly, a family friend started talking about the army that would be stationed in their village. For everyone else, such an abrupt turn in the conversation was strange. They just kept blinking at each other. Sepha happily grabbed Dee by the shoulders and told him that he would be the captain of those very troops. That's why he asked me to take care of him. Such news was clearly like a bolt from the blue. Without waiting for additional and clarifying questions from Lord D, the acquaintance said goodbye to his friends and set off, leaving the head of the village alone with his thoughts and guesses. This news unsettled the father of the main character. He was worried about the whole situation. Tin was extremely calm and confident that these were not such terrible circumstances. She added that they would be able to afford to cover the cost of deploying troops, thanks to the secret dish. Watching the conversation between his parents, Tidus mentally agreed with his mother's opinion. However, the main character faced another problem. At this rate, the price of dried eels will decrease if they can't come up with anything and take action. After thinking and figuring out the ideas, Tidus smiled maliciously and looked at Dee. He turned to his desperate father. He suggested that Dee, as the head of the village, take the next step. Then he asked Dad if he guessed or if he had any ideas about what they should do. With great pride and inspiration, the main character introduced the water wheel. He explained that he wanted to make the water turn the wheel. For clarity, various objects were laid out on the floor in front of Dee in the room. Looking at the stone lying on the wooden plank, Dee wondered what a water wheel was. Then, to demonstrate the operation of the device, Tidus asked his father to try to push the stone. Dee obediently did what was required of him. Next, Tidus began to make something, attaching wheels to the structure. Dee could only watch everything, not understanding what he should expect. Then Tidus asked his father again to try to push the peculiar machine with the same force as before. Dee followed the instructions again. Despite the simplicity of the experiment, Dee was amazed by what had happened. The guy was surprised that he got this move much easier this time. Tin supported her husband by talking about her experience, which was similar to his. The girl said that she was surprised at first. Tidus then shared the idea that if they increased their size, they would be able to move heavy objects with ease. Dee was extremely pleased with this idea. The prospects associated with such a cart seemed tempting to the man. Dee believed that the more things they could carry, the easier it would be for them to trade. After thinking about it, he asked his son if this was the original goal. However, the main character denied this. He just said that this experiment was just for a visual explanation of how the wheel works. Then he told about his true goal, which he needed carpenters to achieve. After his son made a request to him, Dee thought about a solution. Without hesitation, he offered to talk to the local carpenters. On one of the usual days, Tidus was playing with fans in the company of his friends Farrell and Jesse. The children looked very happy as they watched the harnessed animal trying to move from its place. At such a moment, a menacing-looking man burst into the courtyard of the village head who was looking for Dee's son. The man was wearing work clothes, and his face, covered with abundant hair, expressed concern. He gripped the sheet tightly in his hands. As soon as an unknown man broke into the house of the village head, everyone except Tidus withdrew in fright. Upon hearing that the man was looking for him, the main character boldly raised his hand and introduced himself as the son of the village head, Tidus. Unexpectedly and sharply in response, shouting very loudly, the man expressed his surprise that the boy could speak clearly. He made sure for himself that the rumors about the literacy of the son of the village head were true. The man proudly said that he was one of the local carpenters named Giraffe. Tidus covered his ears because the man's voice was too loud for him. Nevertheless, the hero asked how he could be useful. Giraffe abruptly grabbed the boy by the arm and threw him over his arm. Tidus was completely shocked by this turn of events. He didn't expect anything like this, so he started screaming. That's how the carpenter and the hero set off together. Giraffe quickly ran away from Tidus's place of residence. He acted confidently and smartly. The rest of the guys who remained in the house, from shock, only looked after the carpenter who dragged the main character away. As a result, the guys got to the Giraffe workshop. It could be seen that there were various materials for work in the building. When he reached the workshop, Giraffe slammed his hand on the table and demanded an answer from Tidus. The carpenter was wondering if the little boy could create the drawing given to him on his own. The hero confirmed his words. After hearing the boy's answer, Giraffe could not believe the truthfulness of the hero's words. The emotionality and loud voice scared Tidus. The boy was somewhat scared by the man's reaction. After the carpenter gave himself time to realize and accept the fact that the son of the village head had created the drawing, he burst into tears like a child and expressed his admiration for Tidus. The man was so surprised that he couldn't contain his emotions. Witnessing such a scene, Tidus thought about the resemblance of a giraffe to a wolf. However, behind the formidable appearance, a sheep was hiding in the soul. Then the main character decided to call his new friend Uncle Wolf. After Tidus was forcibly brought to the workshop, the hero began to create a water wheel with Uncle Wolf. On the first day, Tidus helped his new friend the carpenter figure out his drawing for further work. The hero of Giraffe pointed out the details that are needed and their location. On the third day, the main character was arguing with the carpenter. Giraffe suggested making changes, as he believed that it would be difficult to install the parts in the specified location. Tidus pointed out that it is bad to rely only on carvings. On the fifth day, the guys continued to arrange a showdown. Tidus insisted on the original plan. The hero did not like it when Giraffe made strange edits. The carpenter insisted that his ideas were good. He asked me not to complain about him. The seventh day was the final one. Giraffe, with the help of third-party people, installed a water wheel in the river. The main character, along with his parents, also watched the whole process. Tidus gave recommendations on how and where to install it best. As a result, to the surprise of all those present, the water wheel was installed. Many observers were surprised by the car unknown to them. No one could understand what benefit the water wheel could bring to them. Then Tidus told them that they could use a millstone that would rotate itself. They can use it for tanning hides, grinding seeds, winding wool. Thus, they can create a horizontal one from vertical torsion. After he expressed his idea, he demonstrated how this method would look in action. That's how Tidus revealed to his parents the principle of operation of a water wheel and a millstone that would work independently. Therefore, they do not need people to grind grain. Then Dee made the assumption that now they would be able to use women's labor. In addition, as Tidus said, it will help Tin in consolidating her status and position among the female population. Tin was incredibly happy with such news. She beamed with joy. The whole family started hugging. The parents thanked their son for thinking of them. The main character was incredibly glad that he was able to help his parents. That's how the water wheel project turned out to be a success. However, the whole situation made one feel uncomfortable because of the country of the carpenter's reaction, rejoicing on the sidelines. On one of the sunny and warm days, Tidus, Farrell, and Jesse were playing together with Lashi. This is the name given to the puppy of the main character. Lasha was happily running around, wagging her tail, and Tidus was playfully beckoning his pet to him. When she reached the owner, Lashi jumped into Tidus's arms and began to lick him. I started sweating a little from such close contact. Suddenly, the boy was attacked from behind by his girlfriends. Farrell started saying that she was going to tell him some news. That's how the main character found out about Farrell's upcoming birthday. When he was already at home, Tidus found his piggy bank, in which he saved money. Lifting up the box, the hero turned it over, thereby throwing all the coins on the floor. Tidus began to count his savings. He hoped that he had enough for a gift. Since his family started selling dried fish, the main character began to receive some money from his parents. The problem is that the boy did not know what gift he should give Farrell. Moreover, he had no way to go shopping alone. Thus, he went to the village fair in the company of his mother. Tin happily accompanied her son along the way. She hoped Tidus would be able to find something for Farrell's birthday present. There were many different stalls with vegetables, fruits, and dishes in the market. In one of these shops, Tidus noticed an unusual snack. There were round, hot pies on the counter. Tidus and Tin decided to try an unusual dish, so each got one pie. They sat down on the stairs, which was not far from the village fair. Tin and Tidus happily began their meal. Before nightfall, the main character and his mother returned home. Night had fallen outside. Everything is plunged into darkness, and the sky is covered with stars that shine brightly and illuminate the road. At home, the guys laid out their purchases, among which were fabric, thread, cotton. All this was the right material for a gift for the girl. Thymus told his mother that his gift would be homemade. Tin agreed with him. Tin and Tidus were set to work. The girl rolled up her sleeves and offered to get to work. Then Tin took out a needle and threaded a thread into her ear. She was serious about it. Holding a needle in front of her, she announced the beginning of work on creating a gift. Her hands began to move with incredible speed. It was impossible to follow her movements. She did embroidery with ease. At this time, the shocked Tidus could not even move from his place in surprise. Looking at the skill with which Tin performed the work, the main character admired the awesome speed and accuracy. He was impressed by the embroidery culture. Tin, without stopping working, asked and clarified some points. While Tin was doing embroidery, an excited Tidus advised his mother not to stuff the product too much, otherwise it would be too stiff. He wanted the gift to be soft and fluffy. Tin apologized. She explained that she hadn't thought about it in advance. Therefore, she asked the opinion of the boy, who happily agreed with the girl's actions. Tidus later told his mother that all the other details were up to him. Tin was very pleased with her son's initiative. Her face was already flushed. On Farrell's birthday, the main character went to visit his girlfriend for a celebration. There was a beautiful flower wreath on the girl's head. That day, Farrell received many sincere congratulations, which she was incredibly happy about. After friendly and loud congratulations, Tidus personally presented his girlfriend with a gift that he had created with difficulty for her. The girl was incredibly happy with such a gesture. Stars shone in her eyes. Farrell really liked the box that contained the gift. She looked at her and admired her beauty. Then Tidus noticed that the box was not a gift because it was inside. Then the girl carefully lifted the lid of the box with trepidation. She looked inside and was pleasantly surprised. From the box, she pulled out a toy that looks like Farrell's pet named Rin. Little Rin stood next to her toy replica, which was made in full size. Farrell was happy. She clung to Tidus's hand and bid him out of an overabundance of emotion. She told the boy that his gift was very cute and also confessed her love to him. Although Tidus was glad, he was in pain, which he said. At the same moment, Farrell rushed to show all the guests her new toy. Everyone wanted to see what Tidus had given her. He continued to stand and observe the reaction. Quietly, his other girlfriend, Jessie, approached the main character from behind. She grabbed her friend's shirt and pulled, drawing his attention. She was very confused. Blushing, she admitted that she wanted to take a look, too. Noticing Jessie, Tidus patted her on the head and said that she would have to wait a little, giving the girl hope that he would give her the same toy for her birthday. Returning home, Tidus shared with his mother that he was glad that Farrell liked the plush toy. Holding the boy's hand, Tin reminded him that he would have a birthday soon. She offered to mark it big. On the way home, Tin and Tidus came across a team that was doing some kind of work. Dee was among the team. They called out to him. Hearing familiar voices, the man turned around. Noticing his son, Dee asked if Farrell's birthday was fun. Tidus, happily running towards his parent, said yes. Then Tin asked her husband how the construction of the barracks went. Dee said the construction was going well. He said that the apartment building proposed by Tidus is being built at an active pace. Suddenly, someone started shouting and calling the main character, calling him the Third. The man was running fast and fast. Giraffe began to share emotionally with the hero that the idea of the house was amazing. He said that they needed a lot of materials, but they are all identical, so the costs have decreased. Besides, the density is perfect. The man was amazed, as always. Sepha also approached the guys, who liked the idea of placing a toilet and kitchen in each room. And most importantly, everything is under one roof, as if it's all like one room. Sepha liked it much more than the barracks in the capital. Sepha shared that morale and loyalty had unexpectedly increased due to Dee's generosity. Dee warned the warriors to keep the rooms clean. Sepha assured him that they would clean up frequently. Sepha picked up the hoe and expertly turned it over in his hands. He said that all the troops had been assembled and offered to start work. Then, in front of a crowd of warriors, Dee ordered the field to be plowed. The men were outraged that instead of training, they would be engaged in the field. A serious-minded Dee said that their goal is to improve endurance and provide themselves with provisions on their own, so he said that everyone would have to work hard. All the warriors got to work, and Sepha shared his opinion about the bronze hoe. He said he had never seen one like it before. The hoe turned out to be heavy, so it went deep. The bronze helped to cope with the hard ground. However, he added that it doesn't even come close to being a workout. Then Tidus said they needed to get to know the community. Dee said that the locals did not understand why there were troops in the village. Therefore, they need to eliminate the misunderstanding that has arisen. All this will bring great benefits in the future. Dee said that sooner or later the village will develop new lands, so he wants these lands for the warriors. He assumed that if they had their own possessions, they would do their job with pleasure. Sepha praised his friend for the genius of his plan. However, he suggested not to tell anyone about it yet because it's not time to cut the fish yet. Suddenly, Sepha rushed to the warriors and began to make remarks to them. Dee said that even when he's demanding, he's so charming. Tidus added that he did not want to become his enemy. After a while, the warriors fit into the life of the village, and the village became bustling. Concerns about public safety were just concerns. Thanks to the soldiers who did police work, people felt safe. The economy continued to improve, and taxes increased, which, accordingly, was like a godsend. A couple of months later, Tidus's birthday came. The table was set with a variety of dishes. All the guests were looking forward to it. Everyone clapped their hands and rejoiced. All the children of the village gathered around the main character. The children joyfully scattered flower petals and shouted, "Happy birthday." Tidus was incredibly happy. His eyes were shining with joy. He was in a pleasant shock. He thanked everyone who came to his party and decided to share the best moments with him. Suddenly, the boy was attacked by his girlfriend Farrell. The excited girl immediately handed over the gift she had made to Tidus. The hero unfolded a canvas with embroidery in the form of a bird. He noticed that the embroidery was done a little rough. Then he asked his girlfriend if she had done the embroidery herself. The girl was obviously happy that Tidus noticed her efforts. She was delighted, and a smile shone on her face, and she bit into the boy's hand again. Veli came up to the guys, who threw a scarf over the shoulders of the main character. Tidus began to look at the gift and thanked the girl for doing this for him. Smiling broadly, she corrected Tidus again. Jessie followed the birthday boy. She was holding in her hands a national headdress decorated with beautiful embroidery. The girl was very embarrassed and wished her friend a happy birthday. The boy stared at his gift in fascination. He noticed that the embroidery on the headdress was made by the girl herself. Then he thanked her and whispered to Jessie that he couldn't wait for her birthday. Looking at all the happy guests, Tidus rejoiced at how wonderful his birthday was going. He was glad, because it was the first time he had had such an experience considering his previous life. As night fell, all the parents with sleepy children went home. The parents turned to Tidus and said that after such a party in honor of his birthday, they would give him their gifts. Already at the house, Tin handed her son a box, simultaneously congratulating the birthday boy on the holiday. He took the lid off the box and pulled out a beautiful vest. He was flattered by such a wonderful gift. Hugging his vest, Tidus thanked his mother and said that he was very happy to receive it. Dee then gave the boy a knife, which was inside the case, which had a beautiful hand carving on it. The hero was surprised by such a gift. The father explained that it is usually given on the third birthday as a sign that a person has become a full-fledged member of society. However, Dee expressed his confidence that his son would cope. Dee told Tidus that he believed in him, which pleased the main character. Beaming with happiness, the boy thanked his father. His parents said they were worried about him because he often overdo it. However, they are proud of him. They said they would always support him no matter what happened. After that, they again congratulated on their second birthday. Tidus has decided to believe in others, to rely on others for things he can't do anything about, and for those he has to. This time, the main character does not intend to make a mistake. After all, he is confident with his parents. One of the days at the village fair was full of life. It was full of people. Everyone was looking for what they needed and buying. It was on such a day that Tidus strolled through the streets. The owners of each shop, when they noticed him, offered different goods. So the man talked about high-quality meat, while the woman offered to taste the tastiest fruits. One child noticed that the main character had a knife, to which his mother said that this young boy was independent. The attention that was focused on the personality of the main character confused Tidus. He cringed in embarrassment. The main character asked Tin if it was necessary to carry a blade with him. In response, his mother laughed and said that carrying a knife with you is a necessary condition. Tina insisted that her son wear it with pride. However, Tidus did not want anyone to know that when his mother saw him with a blade, she was moved and cried. Later, Tidus, accompanied by his mother, visited the giraffe workshop. Noticing the giraffe workshop, the carpenter greeted them loudly in his usual manner. He asked how the third one was doing. Closing his ears because of the loud-voiced giraffe, Thymus asked about the readiness of the thing he asked his friend to do. The carpenter confidently replied that she was ready. He asked me to wait until he brought it. Having got the right thing, Giraffe handed it into the hands of the main character. He reported that he had done everything as Thymus had asked. However, the carpenter still did not understand what it was for. In response, the hero only said that it was a secret that he would later find out about. Upon hearing such an intriguing statement, Giraffe cheered up and said he couldn't wait for this moment. Then Tin mysteriously asked her son if he had already guessed it himself, to which Tidus confidently said with a victorious smile, "Of course. He and Farrell have already celebrated their birthdays, and, therefore, the next one will be a celebration in honor of Jesse's birthday." During the celebration, as always, people congratulated the main culprit of the celebration. On her birthday, Happy Jessie was beautifully dressed, and a flower wreath was on the girl's head. Farrell's friend enthusiastically immediately presented a gift to the girl, for which, embarrassed and sweetly, Jessie, slightly distorting the word, thanked her friend. Tears welled up in Jessie's eyes, and Farrell couldn't contain her emotions either. Looking at each other, they hugged each other sharply, sobbing violently. The main character was clearly not ready for this. The girls' mothers began to reassure their friends, and behind him, Tidus was afraid to imagine the reaction after such a gift presentation. The tearful Jessie was called by the hero from behind. She turned around, wiping away her tears. Immediately, Tidus decided to present his gift with congratulations. There was a small box in the girl's hands. Jessie was looking at a small gift box. She was clearly upset. The girl drooped, and Tidus noticed that her look was so sad because of the size of the gift. At this time, Farrell was already standing behind the main character, who looked very joyful. Sensing her presence, Tidus thought that she would soon be over the moon with happiness. Noticing that the girl felt a little sad, the boy asked her to open the box. She, in turn, fearing, very carefully began to lift the lid. With one eye closed, she watched with the other and looked out for the contents. Eventually, she pulled out the comb. She had a small, neat comb in her hands. However, the birthday girl had no idea what was in her hand right now. Then she took a fancy and noticed that her gift had beautiful flowers on it. Farrell was very upset that Tidus gave such a beautiful gift to Jessie, so she bit the boy hard out of anger. Jessie's attention was focused on her hair comb. She continued to stare in fascination. Then Tidus reached for the comb. He wanted to show the girl how to use her new gift. He took the girl's curls and began to comb them carefully. The teeth easily slipped through the strands. As a birthday present, Jesse Tidus asked Uncle Wolf to make a comb. While he cut out the pattern with his own hands, Mom and Dad watched him work. In the village, girls comb their hair only on special occasions, as they cannot afford to buy combs. The main character continued to comb the girl's black, thick hair. She really enjoyed the process. She was very pleased. All this time, Farrell was biting the boy. When he was done, he fixed her hair beautifully with a comb and ribbon. The hairstyle turned out to be so beautiful that everyone present opened their mouths in surprise. There was silence in the building. When the main character finished doing his girlfriend's hair, Jessie, touching her hair, said that it was very beautiful. The girl was so glad that she immediately rushed to hug her friend. Hugging Tidus, Jessie's eyes widened in gratitude and appreciation for the hero. Looking at the girl, Tidus was a little taken aback. Suddenly, she kissed the boy on the cheek and confessed her love for him. When Farrell saw Jessie kiss the boy, she became jealous of Tidus. She quickly jumped up to the hero and also hugged the boy on the other side. Tidus felt uncomfortable. He just wished they would stop. A few days later, it was a clear, sunny day. Tidus was lying on the floor in his room, thinking about something. His thoughts were immersed in the creation of a new mechanism. He didn't know what to do to him. Lashi began to tumble and rolled to the layout, which remained after a clear example of the principle of operation of the water wheel for parents. As soon as the wagons come into use, we will have to refine a lot. First, you need to make them more convenient. Then you will need to teach people how to use them, as well as take care of them, otherwise they will break down quickly. Tidus thought about the grease for the wheels. He began to guess what he should use as a lubricant. His guesses led to animal fat. Vegetable oil is obtained from nuts and seeds containing a lot of oil and fat. For example, camellia and rapeseed, which are the raw materials for making a comb, and they will be able to squeeze them out with the help of a water wheel. After thinking about camellia, Tidus abruptly stood up and asked to look after the house. The main character told Lasha that he was going to visit his mother for a while. Tidus ran to his mother and asked if she had camellia oil. Tin wondered what he needed it for. The boy said that he needed to try it for something. Mom was interested and said that Dee had it. Dee, noticing the household, warned that he was working. He asked what his wife and son needed. They, standing in the doorway, asked for camellia oil. Dee, taking out the oil, talked about its use in skincare and swords. Tidus said he needed to take some of it. Dee didn't mind, but he didn't understand what his son was going to do. Then Tidus very mysteriously said that it was a secret. Dee remained in the dark. Back in the room, Tidus asked his mother to wash her hair. Tin was a little confused because she had just washed her son's hair yesterday. He clarified that he would like his mother to wash it. Tin began to sniff and doubt the cleanliness. Then Tidus, noticing his mother's confusion, explained to her that her hair could become even more beautiful. Hearing such a statement, she rushed to wash her hair. During Mom's absence, he poured camellia oil into a cup. Tin did not take long to wait. She finished quickly. Then, when Tin sat down on the floor, Tidus warned that he would touch her hair. There is a custom in this village. Touching a woman's hair by a man is a manifestation of supreme love. There is nothing wrong with this if it happens between parents and a child. However, he still decided to warn her for the sake of decency. Thymus applied the oil very carefully to the hair so as not to make it too sticky. In addition, then it will be difficult to wash your hair from camellia oil. Tin happily said that she was very pleased. Thymus continued to carry out the running procedures with a serious look. He ran the comb through his mother's hair very gently. When he finished, the effect was instantaneous. The girl's hair began to shine beautifully, which she was incredibly happy about. Tin grabbed a lock of hair and looked at it. She said they looked beautiful. She wondered if this idea would be widely spread among the village. The joyful Thymus stood and smiled. He was glad that his mother liked it. Tin abruptly picked up the boy in her arms and rushed back to her husband's office. The working Dee, who was disturbed again, was a little annoyed that they decided to distract him from important things again. Tin ran in with a call to look at her. Despite his irritation, Dee calmed down and blushed when he saw how beautiful Tin had become with her hair that had been oiled. Trembling, Dee approached Tin. He couldn't stop shaking. The sight of his wife amazed him so much that he even began to say in a trembling voice that she was gorgeous. Besides, he almost mistook her for another person. Without waiting for her husband's hug, Tin herself jumped on Dee and hugged him tightly, which made the man nervous and blushed. He began to twist the girl. Tin was glad that her husband liked it. She told me that Tidus did. Dee was surprised and said that now her hair looked so well groomed. He couldn't believe Tidus had done this. D picked up his wife's hair. He noticed that Tin's hair was shining brightly. The man compared their brilliance to a polished sword. However, Tin did not appreciate such a comparison. She didn't like the fact that her hair resembled a sword. However, Tin was incredibly glad that her husband liked her appearance. D went to the sword rack and took out one of several. He pulled the wedge out of its scabbard, and at that moment Tin saw her reflection. She was fascinated by her appearance. While the parents cooed, Tidus decided to leave them alone. He decided not to linger, so as not to be the third person. Later, he asked the merchants to start buying camellia, and the parents agreed. On the morning after his second birthday, Tidus opened his eyes before dawn. His mother lay sleeping next to him. He got out unnoticed and crawled to the chest of drawers. He lifted the lid and took out the knife that had been given to him by his father. He partially pulled the blade out of its scabbard and began to admire it. He was very happy, and he started laughing. While he was enjoying himself, he did not notice how his mother came up to him from behind. She reached out her hands and put the blade back in its case. The figure of the mother loomed over the child. She said she knew he was very happy. However, she warned that it was very dangerous. She asked him not to pull out the knife blindly until he got used to it. Tidus dutifully agreed with his mother and listened to her advice. She praised him. That's how the hero's morning began. Tin took him to get ready, saying that Tidus would later be able to show everyone that he could now carry a knife. After all the morning procedures, Tidus was prepared to meet with friends. Now his image was complemented by a knife. The jubilant children greeted him. Sounds of surprise swept through the room. Such attention embarrassed the boy. Farrell approached the main character and began to examine his gift from his father. She asked if Tidus was an adult now that he wore such an attribute. The boy said that the knife was a gift for his birthday. Jessie came over and patted her friend, saying that he was an adult now. Tidus felt a little awkward. The children looked at him with eyes full of envy. But a knife is a dangerous thing, so he kept it in a box. The whole situation made him think about his peers. He wanted to do something to them. Having got his hands on a log, the hero decided to cut something out of it. Of course, he said cut out, but to do something normal with his current body is a test, so he decided to just give the tree a rectangular shape. A couple of days later, his mother allowed him to use the knife under her supervision. However, he had no idea in his head what to do about it. He was lying down and holding a log above him. While he was looking at it, he had an idea of an application. 3 days later, Tidus met with Farrell and Jessie. He showed his friends a new toy that he had recently made. The girls were surprised. They didn't know what it was, and they looked interested. Spinning the spinner between his palms, Tidus told the girls to watch what would happen. After making all the preparations, the hero released the toy, which flew into the air. The children cheerfully watched him take off. Jessie and Farrell, who had never seen anything like it, couldn't take their eyes off the turntable. They watched the whole flight with their mouths open in surprise. Noticing the landing, they both rushed to the toy, but accidentally collided and fell. When it comes to woodworking, naturally, the first thing the hero did was a bamboo helicopter. He made the propeller without any problems, because he had already done them before. But for the main rod, he needed help to process the piece of wood. But seeing the result, Tidus thought it was worth it. Although the helicopter was not of the best quality, however, the main character managed to launch a bamboo helicopter into the sky. The boy was very pleased with himself. As a result, when the residents saw the soaring toy, everyone wanted to make the same one. A huge crowd rushed towards Tidus. People wanted him to make them the same bamboo helicopters. In the end, everything returned to normal only when he explained to them how to make bamboo helicopters. Only Giraffe was exhausted. The man looked depressed. Tidus regretted that he had ruined Uncle Wolf's life with his actions. Tidus came to his workshop. The carpenter greeted him inhospitably. In the end, the residents had to constantly turn to Uncle Wolf for the main rods. Another couple of thin sticks and Giraffe was ready to go crazy. It looked like he had a lifelong injury. Tidus said that he wanted the carpenter to make a new tool. Giraffe was glad of this statement. He was ready for anything but a helicopter. The main character said that he needed skewers. However, at the same moment, the carpenter's gaze turned glassy. He didn't understand what that meant. Then the boy drew on the ground what it looks like. The hero explained that it was necessary to roast meat and fish. Holding a small wand, Giraffe was dubious about Tidus's idea. But Tidus knew that the people in the village did not have utensils for cooking small pieces of food. Therefore, the hero replied that he wanted something tasty. The man thought again and said that he was already tired of doing things of this shape. Tidus then calmed him down by suggesting that he create a lathe. He explained to him the simplicity of the device and the appearance of the instrument. Uncle Wolf was very excited about the idea and set to work without further ado. A few days later, Giraffe and several other craftsmen began testing the created lathe. Men settled down on both sides and began pulling on the ropes of the device. After the guys pulled the ropes, the mechanism of the car came into action. Under tension, the main body of the machine began to spin rapidly in a circle. Sitting down in front of the raw materials sticking out of the machine, he began to bring his sharp tool. He began to slowly move his tool further, using the rotation created by the machine. Thus, the carpenter managed to quickly achieve the required shape without much effort. When he finished, he held up a stick. After that, Tidus took a small wand in his hands and admired the result achieved. Then he said that he wanted Giraffe to make more of these products. This time, the carpenter agreed and told the hero to rely on him. One day, when Giraffe completed the work on the order, Tidus and Tin cooked a shish kebab of green pheasants on an improvised barbecue with the help of skewers. At this time, Dee came to the smell. Tin said that this dish was invented by her son. They bought the meat of a green pheasant from a hunter, cut it into pieces and strung it on skewers, and also well salted. The whole family gathered together at the barbecue. All three of them simultaneously rumbled their stomachs, which made them all laugh together. Everyone was eager to try the new dish. After some time, the meat was cooked. The pieces on the skewers were laid out on a plate. Hungry, Tidus, Tin, and Dee looked greedily at the barbecue, so they began to eat. After taking a bite, everyone was amazed by the taste of the meat. Without agreeing, they silently enjoyed together how pleasant the shish kebab tasted. After a while, Dee said that it was amazing that simple fried meat with salt could be so delicious. Tin added that the smell was pleasant. They praised Tidus for providing the recipe. Dee praised the dish, saying that baked pheasant during the trip does not compare to baked green pheasant meat. In addition, the smell is different from when the dish is cooked on a cauldron. A joyful Tidus added that cooked on coals is tastier. Moreover, the juice smells delicious, and the meat is cooked slowly. Suddenly, Tidus remembered that fish turns out very tasty on coals. My parents suggested cooking tomorrow. During the meal, someone knocked on the front door of the family. Together, they went to greet the guests who had gathered at their house because of the delicious smell that had spread to the whole neighborhood. So after the eel boom, there was a yakitori boom, and Uncle Wolf, who had just recovered from the production of bamboo helicopters, now had to urgently make a lot of skewers. As always, Tidus was playing in the company of his friends. Each tried to get the boy's attention. Jessie preened herself and asked Tidus for his opinion. However, by praising Jessie's appearance, the hero made Farrell angry and jealous. This situation made the main character worry, so he turned to his father for advice, who was amused by his son's problem. He could not calm down for a long time, which angered Tidus. Noticing his son's displeasure, Dee explained that his wife has a simple and direct character, so it is difficult for him to advise. The father assumed that it was not easy for the boy and thought seriously about solving such a question. In his previous life, when the hero gave gifts to his wife or daughter, they were always unhappy. Compared to his past self, an ordinary white collar, Tidus's current father is just perfect. He has a handsome appearance, is a fearless warrior, and a landowner. The opinion of a man of such a flight did not seem to help the main character in any way, so he gave up and left without waiting for an answer. Then Tidus turned to his mother for help because he believed that no one understands women better than other women. However, the whole situation made her laugh, and she couldn't help but laugh. This made Tidus angry, so Tin apologized to him and said he was so cute. She took her son's request seriously and offered to think about it. She explained that Jessie used to be Farrell's slave, so she wasn't sure of herself. However, probably since she became so beautiful, she has gained confidence in herself. Tidus assumed that Farrell and Jessie were now on equal terms. However, Tin expressed the opinion that relationships between people are always changing, so they will not always be able to be equal with each other. Despite his mother's explanations, the main character could not understand anything. Looking at Lasha, he thought that this is who has a good life. There's no need to worry about anything. Day after day, Tidus's attention continued to be drawn between the girls. Unable to stand it, he told them that none of them was more special than the other. He stated that they were both equally important to him. Besides, he appreciates them both. As soon as the girls listened to the boy, they began to shake from the feelings and emotions that overwhelmed them. Suddenly, they both beamed with joy at becoming Tidus's brides. The hero was shocked by what had happened and did not know how to react. The girls rushed to share the news with their mothers. Upon learning that their daughters had become brides, the women cast a menacing glance at the thymus lime. Suddenly, men passed by the hero, who fell to his knees. Turning towards the voices, Thymus noticed his old acquaintances who greeted him. They were friendly until they found out that he had become the fiancé of their granddaughters. Their gazes became as threatening as those of their mothers. The girls doted on their friend, whom they loved, and their parents and grandfathers were hostile. They warned the hero not to upset their granddaughters, because they will count on him for many years to come. Tidus told his parents about the incident, who burst out laughing. When they saw their son puffing out his cheeks, they convinced him that there was no need to worry, because they would definitely protect him if he did not like something. They sweetly offered a helping hand, saying that they would support him in any case. The words of the parents calmed the hero. However, the problem for D was the heads of the girls' families. Tin told D not to let them lead him by the nose, because he's a refresher. Since then, grandfathers Farrell and Jesse have been constantly visiting the hero's family. They were definitely trying to starve them out. D and Tin couldn't deploy them at the doorstep because it interferes with the refresho's work. The hero is very tired of everything. By the time the dust settled, summer was in full swing. The water wheel that Tidus asked the carpenter to make was successfully built. The main character was thinking of making a few more. However, he has not yet decided what exactly it should be connected to, either to the mill or to the blacksmith shop, or maybe to the barn. Therefore, the hero wanted to conduct a couple of experiments. So far, the mill is the most popular option, especially among women. All the profits earned by the village are completely spent on the creation of new tools and the maintenance of old ones. That is, in fact, the village does not earn at all. At the moment when Tidus was thinking, his mother came up to him and poked him in the cheek with her finger. He told me what he thinks about protecting the village and goods for trade. Worried, Tin said that he didn't need to worry because the treasury was growing on its own. Confidently, Tidus declared that he wanted to protect what was dear to him, and that requires money. After hearing her son's speech, Tin hugged him and warned him that strengthening the village's position could lead to unnecessary suspicions and conflicts. Tidus immediately understood what it meant that they would fall under the suspicion of the crown. Then the hero thought that if he focused on the wealth of the village, it was very likely that the king would do something. The official in charge of the village will report everything. In that case, Tidus thought about what he should do in order not to lose the king's trust. Then he decided to fall at the king's feet, because that way he could manipulate him for the benefit of the village. The main character decided to tell his father his plan, but he refused. D strictly cut through his son's attempts to think about it. D explained that he had also thought about it, but his son should not take everything on his shoulders. Then D told Tidus that his talents shine brightest when he thinks about how to make money. Then he remembered his mother's warnings about creating new products. Tin explained that, as a mother, she would not want her son to grow up wanting to hurt anyone. Therefore, she urged the hero not to think about such things. Tin wanted her son to become a good man. Thus, the hero understood everything. He finally decided not to think about profit and military power as a single concept. The parents calmed the child down and urged him to rest more, because there is nothing shameful in not knowing or misunderstanding some things. Tidus was so ashamed that he was trying to do everything with his own hands again. He thought he could handle everything, but he was absolutely wrong. The hero decided that he had acted too brazenly and exceeded his authority. Despite the fears that he would not be able to sleep, Tidus immediately fell asleep as a result. While playing in the river, the hero accidentally stumbled upon large pieces of iron ore. Putting two and two together, he realized that there was an open mineral vein somewhere nearby. After that, Thymus tried to find copper and tin for the villagers. When their village starts producing iron, there will be a huge demand for tinning and galvanized steel. If they're lucky, they'll be able to get everything for themselves. The main character told his father that he needed people for this. Moreover, he was allowed to hide soldiers for his case, and so their metal epic began. In the waters of the river, a huge crowd of men constantly searched. Everyone with special sifting devices was trying to find the metal they needed. While they were searching, the soldiers did not forget to retrain. Some couldn't find a single stone when others were constantly finding something. Someone was enjoying the weather and the water. Someone was looking at the fish. Thymus also took part in the search for precious stones and metals. He carefully sifted through the objects caught from the river stream, so he found something and shared the news with his father. The main character happily informed D that he had managed to catch the tin. However, D doubted whether this stone was definitely tin. The hero added that he was not sure yet. Then D suggested that there might be a deposit nearby. Suddenly, Tidus began to sneeze. His father told him that at this rate he would catch a cold, so he told him to go get warm, which the boy did. Already on the shore, Tidus calmly examined his finds, caught with the help of a special sieve. His discovery was a great surprise to him. He told his father that he had been able to find the gold. D himself could not contain his emotions from what he heard. They whispered among themselves that they would try to find a deposit. To do this, they needed a reliable person who could keep secrets. A few days after the search, D shared the results of their campaign to identify the gold deposit. D said that they had to walk a long distance along the river for 3 days, as far as we could walk. They won't be able to sell gold anyway, it's controlled by the crown, so it's just a small thing. At this rate, the cost of labor would exceed the profit from gold. D decided to take responsibility and hand over the gold to the crown, since the gold belongs to them anyway. Tidus interrupted his father and warned him that the piece of gold he had found would now belong to him, since he had found it. Later, Tidus and his mother went to see Giraffe in his workshop. They asked him to create a box with a carved pattern, as if for simple childbirth or something. The hero added that wishes of healthy heirs and good luck and money are needed. After all, everyone will be happy to receive such a box. Then the carpenter asked to give him a minute to prepare something. After some time, when Tidus and his mother, busy with embroidery, were waiting for the completion of the work, Giraffe showed them a beautiful box created by his hands. There were carvings on all sides, which were carefully done by Giraffe. Thymus turned to his mother. Having made sure of the correctness and confidence of her son's decision, she handed the wooden box to the carpenter. Inside, he found the gilding that Tin and the blacksmith had made. The main character said that he gently applied glue to the box and gold on top of it. Uncle Wolf was clearly not happy with this turn of events because he tried when he made all the patterns. The inside of the box is upholstered with good red felt. They glued gilding on the outside. They carefully smoothed it out with a soft felt cloth. The result was beauty. The box, covered with gold, shone all over. She looked so gorgeous that everyone reacted. It remains only to process the corners. When the box was completely ready, Tidus was very pleased to provide it to his father, who was not ready for this and did not know how to react. D compared the box to a real work of art, but he didn't understand anything when he found out that it took this gold that they found. Tin said that the blacksmith made a thin sheet of gold. He realized that they had just wrapped the box in gold. D began to examine the gilded box. He said with joy in his voice that it was very beautiful, so it was difficult to come up with a better one. Tidus told about the prosperity wishes carved on the box. The hero added that anyone would like such a gift. D patted his son as a compliment. After D asked to explain the idea of what he plans to do out of the box, the main character happily stated that he just wanted to surprise not only him, but also the king. After the words about the king, D did not look very happy, rather worried and upset. He added that surprising people is not always a good thing. Tidus noticed that his father did not like his idea. A few weeks passed unnoticed, and the end of summer was just around the corner. On one of the last summer days, the hero's family began their morning as usual with bathroom procedures. Suddenly, the military quickly rushed to their house with the news. One of them informed Refresho that the blue flag of the royal family was at the gate. This shocked the head of the village. He ordered Sifa to be called to him. By the color of the flag, you can tell who exactly came. The king's is yellow, the queen's is red, and the royal children's is blue. The Refresho Veda has a purple flag, and the Refresho has a green one. Tidus asked his mother what had happened. She hugged her son tightly and said that everything would be fine because he had done nothing wrong. Sepha rushed headlong on horseback to the house of the D family. When he was plowed, he asked what had happened, since the coat of arms of Vetyama was in front of the gate. Then D added that she was a selfish daughter, so it doesn't bode well. D ordered Sifa to do everything possible so that she would not notice the water wheel or the pulley on the well. As a result, the head of the village sent his friend to hide everything as quickly as possible from prying eyes. In addition, the artisans were also told to stay at home. Relying on Seifa, D sent him on errands. Seifa has received permission to speculate on his position, so the hero's family was left waiting for an important guest. Tidus asked his father who Vethi-sama was. He said that she was the youngest daughter of the king. She is 7 years old. Suddenly, the hero repeated the words about the selfish woman. The father very gently asked his son not to tell anyone what he said. After all, she's not only stubborn, but also influential. Therefore, he advised Tidus to watch his tongue. The hero asked his mother if she was personally familiar with their long-awaited guests. Tin, with a very disappointed expression on her face, said that this was still a punishment for her. Based on all the reviews of the vet-sama, Tidus began to feel a bad feeling about the arrival of the royal person to them. On the territory of the village, a horse with a princess walked confidently towards the house of the village head, who was surrounded by an entourage from all sides. She was wearing dewy robes, including a cloth covering her head. When she reached her destination, she calmly dismounted from the steed and she confidently approached the people meeting her. A little girl appeared in front of the hero, beautifully and luxuriously dressed, who greeted D, addressing him as an uncle. This treatment shocked Tidus and left him with a lot of questions in his head. The youngest daughter of the current king turned out to be a guest of the main character's family. She sat down on the sofa opposite D, Tina, and Tidus, who greeted the royal personage with a bow. Letissima turned to D and said that she had not seen her uncle for a long time. She majestically and proudly allowed him to look up. The position in which she sat on the sofa spoke of her complacency and confidence. In a whisper, Tidus asked his mother why their guest addressed his father as uncle. Tin said that D was once a royal guard, and that's what she called him. D also greeted his guest. He expressed his joy that Viti-sama was in good health. D mentioned the days 3 years ago when the princess called him every time she was unwell. He said he was very worried about her. These words made the girl blush all over. She was pleased to hear that from D. Tidus wondered if a member of the royal family should somehow control his emotions better. Vethi-sama replied very proudly that she was very young at that time. And now she's 7, and she's already become a real aristocrat. Tidus, observing the behavior of the guest, noticed that, despite her words, he always craves attention. Although at first Oa reminded him of a cat, now she looks like a dachshund begging for praise. D continued to talk politely to the guest. He explained that his position requires a lot of time. Actually, that's why he is very sorry that he could not arrange a decent reception for a member of the royal family. D asked about the purpose of the girl's visit, but she turned the conversation to the hero. Tidus bowed and introduced himself as the Refresho child. He also added that it was an honor for him to meet Vetya-sama. The girl told Tidus to raise his head. She looked at the hero with a grin. However, this look was incomprehensible to him. Noticing the smile on her face, he was at a loss how he had pleased her. Unexpectedly, she stated that, as expected from D, her former guardian, the child was well-mannered. D replied that he was very young, although it might seem that he was very mature. However, he has a lot to learn. After listening to D, she ordered to hand her the makeup bag that Tidus had previously made as a compliment to the royal family. Then Vethi-sama revealed that she got it from her father. Besides, it's time for her to think about the wedding soon. Having brought her thought to marriage, she very playfully and seductively offered D to become her husband. There was a deathly silence in the room. Everyone looked tense, no one said a word. And Tin's expression, moreover, was intimidating. The silence was interrupted by D, who said that he already has a spouse, so he has to refuse. Veda-sama was clearly unhappy with such a refusal. She crossed her arms and said that such gifts are given in honor of the celebration. Therefore, she assumed that this cosmetic bag was a gift in addition to the offer. D said that they inadvertently stumbled upon a small amount of gold, so they decided to give it to the royal family in an original way. However, first they decided to give this small nugget a look that would be a delight to the eyes. The royal princess pouted. She clearly expected something else. She just said that her version was much more interesting. Then she jumped up abruptly and said that she would like to see the village, so she asked D to keep her company. Thus, they left in a small company and went on a tour of the village. Tin became depressed and buried her face in the pillow. Tidus, comforting his mother, asked if everything was so bad. He apologized for doing something to the box that he shouldn't have done. Upset, Tin comforted her son. I assured him of his innocence. She just said that Vethi-sama has always been like this. It turned out that D had lived almost all his life in the Imperial Guards barracks located in the capital. He was like the son of a regiment. Although he was still very young, however, he had a natural talent for martial arts, so he moved up the ranks very quickly. And since they were relatively close in age, he was assigned to guard the Vet-sama. But because of his attractive appearance, D attracted the attention of the princess, who admired him and considered him handsome. Vetti-sama has a huge crush on her handsome guardian, but D fell in love with Tin at first sight. He was so insistent that Tin had to agree. Thymus then concluded that Vethi-sama was kind of a very obsessive little sister. Drooping, Tin added that she didn't think she was still obsessed with him. After hearing the whole story, Tidus was amazed at the fact of what it was all about. Noticing her son's confusion, Tin hugged him and said that everything would be fine because Dee would be able to cope with this situation. However, Thymus was sure that he was to blame for everything, which is why he wanted to fix everything. However, Tin slowed down the hero in time, saying that the box had nothing to do with it. Suspecting something was wrong, the main character asked his mother a question. She replied that his grandparents live in the capital. However, Tidus did not understand how this fact was related to their situation. Tin said that shortly after Dee moved to this village, his parents were called to the capital. Officially, it was announced that they would help your father, who has become a refresher, with the bureaucratic red tape in the capital. But in fact, Vethi-sama decided that Dee would appear in the capital more often if he thought that his parents were in danger. Such information made the hero think about how low she had fallen to get her hands on his father. Tin said that Tidus's grandparents are very active. However, she was sorry that they could not see their grandson. Tidus abruptly replied that he understood everything, but no matter what, he wanted to help. Tin continued to look at her son and smile sweetly. Then she went to prepare for the welcome banquet and notify all the villagers. Vetti, surrounded by Dee and others served, sits on a very soft and cozy sofa and eats. Various dishes are served to her, trying to please a highly esteemed guest. Tin and Tidus eat separately from everyone in a spacious and empty room with nothing but a table. Little Tidus looks at his mother with eyes full of happiness. He says that the eel they are eating now is very tasty. The boy hopes that everyone will like this dish without exception. Tin says that she is sure that this is true. Suddenly, the mother and son hear a loud and strange sound. A little fear distorts from the face, but at the same time a very strong shock. They turn towards the door and both wonder what it was. The eyes of the mother and son were filled with the strongest surprise. The uninvited guest held out a dish in their direction, beautifully lying on a plate. She said that she would give this white fish to her father. The uninvited guest turned out to be Vetti. At the words about the gift to her father, her eyes shone with happiness and excitement. Tin and Tidus looked at the king's daughter with incomprehension, not understanding what was going on here. The hero, sitting in his mother's arms, wonders what the young lady is carrying. Vetya is followed by her subject, who asks her not to run away like that anymore. Then Dee appears in the room and says that the young lady Vetti just liked the fried eel, so she wants the king and queen to try it too. The man also adds that the answer, no, is not accepted. Little Tidus looks at his father uncomprehendingly and asks what's wrong with that. Then the boy asks Dee how long the road will take. The father, thinking about it, replies that the road on horseback and at a leisurely pace will take 3 days, and if you hurry, you can do it in 2 days. The little boy Tidus is thinking about how to solve this problem. Then he suddenly shouts to his father that there is nothing wrong with that. He says they can still send the eel to the king. Dee looks at her son blankly. Then he asks how they will be able to do this if the eel will definitely spoil in the time it takes to travel. The father tells his son that he is getting ahead of himself. Tidus looks at his parents cunningly and conspiratorially and says that if they ride horses for too long, they can use this. Then the boy says that he will look after the eels. The parents look at the boy uncomprehendingly and confusedly, arguing over what this is. The action is postponed to the next day. The young Princess Vetti throws a tantrum, shouting that she does not want to leave and wants to stay here. The girl cries, saying that the inspection of other villages can be postponed. The servant reminds the young capricious lady that if she stays here any longer, she will cause inconvenience to the Refresho Veda. He then reminds the moody girl that she is a member of the royal family, so she should not cause inconvenience to her citizens. Vetti still continues to whimper. She then turns to a dumbfounded Dee. She says that he should definitely come to the capital and take a fried eel with him. Tidus's father smiles and says that he promises Vetti to come to the capital. Then the servants take the capricious princess in their arms and carry her away from the house of Dee and his family. They just look after their unexpected and not very welcome guest. Before she leaves, they kneel as a sign of respect and reverence for her. Then, when the moody young princess leaves the house, the whole family exhales in relief. Suddenly, young Tidus attracts the attention of his parents, saying that there is no time to rest now and that it is necessary to prepare for the transportation of the eel. The boy runs out into the street, runs up to the bearded man of the craftsman, and asks very loudly if the cart is ready. The man asks the boy what happened. Tidus replies to the man that he needs to go to the capital right now, so he needs a cart. The man looks at the child in surprise and says that he has not checked the cart yet, so he is not sure if the hero's idea will work or not. The man asks Tidus if he is sure that he wants to use it, since the man himself cannot ride a horse. The hero raises his little hand up and says that much is not required from the cart. He says that it is only needed to protect the eel. The man looks at the child in surprise. Dee asks her son if he's really going to do this. The man says he still thinks Tidus is too small for such a trip. The hero replies that there are no other options, since he himself must take care of the eel. Then the boy says that he also really wants to see his grandparents. Dee gives up and says she understands perfectly. Then he asks the boy to promise him something. The child looks at his father uncomprehendingly. He asks his son not to burden himself too much and not to do anything dangerous. The boy smiles happily and promises this to his father. The action is postponed to the morning before departure. The bright sun rises over the high mountains. The hero thinks that this time he decided to leave the veterans and newcomers and take all the middle-level warriors on the road. Tidus doesn't even want to talk about how hard it was to get so much food. Further, he thinks that, nevertheless, they took a minimum of any cargo in order to prevent serious losses, in case of unforeseen circumstances. The whole squad gathers at the gate and prepares to leave for the capital. Dee, going on such a long journey, turns to Sepha, saying that he leaves everything else in the village as a whole to him. The man looks disappointed at the head of the village and says that all he does is sit in the village. Dee pats the subordinate on the shoulders encouragingly and says that he is staying here because the village head himself trusts him. The young man smiles and says that the head of the village can rely on him. Then Dee commands that it's time for them to leave, and the squad moves out of the village. Fariel, Jesse, and Wellesley run after them for a while, saying goodbye to little Tidus. The boy happily waves his hand and says that they will see each other soon. Slowly but surely, the village is being left behind. The hero, going on such a long journey, thinks about what adventures await him ahead. He is very excited about this event. On the first day, the squad moves through the forest, where they give the eels, in a sense, to swim in the fresh air, putting a basin outside next to a small river. As a result, one of them bites the hero. On the second day, they reach a new campsite. On the third day, the boy begins to fall asleep in his mother's arms. His father reassures him, saying that they will arrive soon. The horse's hooves clatter loudly on the ground while running. After a while, Dee shouts that they finally got there. He asks little Tidus to look ahead. The boy's face expresses great surprise at the sight of the capital of their vast kingdom. The squad enters the gates of the capital. As soon as the residents of the city saw the purple flag with which Dee and his squad drove into the capital, they immediately realized that the refresher Veda had arrived. All the townspeople were very surprised that Dee decided to honor them with his presence. One of the soldiers ordered to contact His Majesty immediately, as soon as Dee and his squad appeared in the city. Little Tidus, with incomprehension, asks his father why he raised the flag only when they reached the capital, and not before. The father answers his son with a grin that he does not really like to brag about his position. Then he says that, besides, they would have stood out too much against the background of the forest. Dee then says that he decided to raise the flag in the capital so that as many people as possible would know about the cart that little Tidus had come up with. Then Dee drops off his wife and son, and he goes to the reception to the king. Tin and Tidus look after the head of the village and think about how cool he is. A whole squad of merchants is waiting at the gates of the capital. They are discussing why the refresher arrived in the capital. They have several versions, that the war is coming soon or something happened after the visit of young Vidya. Little Tidus admires the views of the capital. He is fascinated by the buildings and people in this city, as they are not at all like those in his native village. Then the young family is greeted by royal servants. One of them says that the meeting with the king is scheduled for a little later, so guests can take their time. The heroes carefully inspect the apartments offered to them. According to them, they look just amazing. Little Tidus takes off his cap and looks around the room with eyes full of delight. The father crouches next to his son and asks him what fascinated him so much. Tin says that since they tried so hard to get here, they should have a good meal before the audience. Little Tidus agrees with her completely. First, the family decides to take a hot bath. Little Tidus liked this activity very much. Then they go to dinner. The table is simply bursting with the variety of dishes offered by him. The characters are happy to try each of them. As a result, they conclude that everything was very tasty. Little Tidus wants to relax and unwind after such a hearty dinner. But suddenly, his father picks him up and tells his son that, unfortunately, they will not be able to relax now, because they need to leave early in order to have time to prepare gifts. And then the boy remembers the audience again. The maids look at the young family and their relationships with affection. The heroes head to the throne room to meet the king. They move in the crowd of other subjects of the king who are also invited to the reception. D slowly approaches the throne, which stands on a small hill to which a staircase leads. Little Tidus thinks that even the head of the village should be here and be closest to the throne. It occurs to the hero that even though his father is far enough away from the throne, he has his own place. But from this distance, little Tidus will not be able to see the expression on his father's face. Suddenly, they begin to announce that Rigveda has arrived. All those present bow their heads and freeze in anticipation of the ruler. The king's unhurried footsteps begin to be heard. Little Tidus freezes in anticipation of seeing this great man. Suddenly, the king comes to the throne and tells D that they haven't seen each other for a very long time, and that he has heard about his achievements. D, without raising his head, answers in the affirmative, and then begins to say something about the king's health. But the ruler interrupts him and says that they can discuss this later. All the subjects are surprised by such a conversation between the king and his loyal subject. Little Tidus understands that there is a very tense atmosphere in this throne room. The action is transferred to the cozy reception room of the king, where everyone present still continues to kneel. D, without looking up from the floor, tells the king that he has not been here for a long time. The king, in turn, allows D to look up at him. The king asks the young family not to pay attention to the guards, then again says that he and D have not seen each other for a long time, and repeatedly asks the man to raise his head because he wants to look at his face. The whole family slowly raises their heads at the king. Suddenly, the ruler abruptly brings his face closer to the little Tidus, which scares him to death. The king laughs fervently and apologizes to little Tidus and pats him gently on the head. The king says the boy is already quite big. In turn, the child bows his head and says that it is a great honor for him to see the king in person. He introduces himself as the son of D, the refresher of the Veda, and he ends his speech by saying that his name is Tidus. The king asks the child to raise his head at him. The man says that little Tidus did very well. Then the king says his name is Rigveda. He also says that if there are any problems, then let him contact him. Suddenly, a short man approaches the king and says that, in his opinion, it is possible to end meaningless conversations. The man says he knows the story in general terms, but he would like to hear the details. This man turns out to be the king's prime minister. D greets him and says that now he will explain everything in a nutshell. D told about Vetya's unexpected visit, and about the problems that she brought to the heads of the family, and about the cart that little Tidus had invented to transport the eel. D explained absolutely everything. The king, hearing all this, clutched his head and called his daughter a naughty girl. The man finally realized why Veti had volunteered to inspect the nearby villages. He then says that he is not saying that she should follow the example of D's son, but if she would calm down a little, then it would be just wonderful. The prime minister asks the king if he thinks he has spoiled his daughter too much. At this moment, the king instantly turns the topic to the cart, which was invented by little Tidus. He clarifies whether this was the thing that was attached to the horse. The prime minister looks at Father Tidus incredulously and questioningly. The same one just looks away. Little Tidus explains to the king how his device works. He says that the horse is pulling something like a cart. The boy says that with the help of such a thing, you can transport a lot more goods on just a horse. The king attentively looks at the demonstration that the boy conducts throughout his story. The king, after listening intently to the boy, says that the technology proposed by Tidus is quite interesting. He asks D how he came up with such a thing. The head of the village says that, in fact, it was invented exclusively by Tidus. The man explains that Madam said that the fate of little Tidus would be illuminated by mercy. The king and the prime minister exchange glances. The king then says that it is quite hard for him to believe that a small child could come up with something like this. But then he says that if Madam said it, then it is true. Suddenly, the boy's mother enters the conversation. She asks His Majesty not to take little Tidus away. The king asks Tin not to worry. He says that even if he hadn't known about his daughter's selfishness, he still wouldn't have separated her from the child. The girl looks at the Lord with eyes full of happiness, gratitude, and joy, and then bows her head in gratitude. Suddenly, the Prime Minister comes up to D and asks him if the smoked fish that D was talking about is also the idea of little Tidus. He says that fish that stays edible longer is a very important invention, both politically and militarily. The Prime Minister says she is already very popular with the soldiers. Suddenly, the king turns to Tidus and says that the boy has raised the morale of the soldiers very well. The king praises the child, saying that he is a great fellow. Then the king says that he would like to get down to business. He asks the young family when they will cook them an eel. The action is transferred to the eels floating in a wooden basin. Tin says that the animals are still alive, so they need to be cooked as soon as possible. The family and the kitchen staff start cooking the eel. They carve the fish, smoke it, put it on skewers, and then prepare it for serving. When the cooking process is completed, the finished fish is taken out to the king for evaluation. The ruler calls the eel beautifully white. His taster stands dejectedly behind the man. Then he tastes one piece of fish, checking for the absence of poison in it. The loyalist's face expresses the utmost surprise. Then he turns to the king, saying that he can try. The king puts one small piece of fish in his mouth. The ruler really likes the dish. He calls its taste quite rich. The ruler says that there is a lot of fat in the eel, but at the same time it chews very well. The man says that this dish smells delicious and that it has a very refined smell. Suddenly, D comes up to the ruler and says that this eel, which he presents to the king, is cooked differently. He asks the king to try it. The ruler assumes that this eel, presented by his faithful servant, is not much different from what he tried earlier. In his opinion, this fish has only a different color. The king and the prime minister are trying a new version of cooking eel. The prime minister, having tasted the fish, says that it is something completely different. He says that this eel is very soft and light, and the taste is spicy and sweet at the same time. The king says the prime minister is right. He says that with every bite he wants more and more. The ruler says that she admits that it was very tasty. He says that everyone has done a very good job. The family exhales with relief. All its members are very happy that the king liked the dishes they cooked. The king says that everyone has done a good job. Here, the prime minister enters into the conversation. He says that, as a result, the general decision was made to expand the consumption of eel in the future and start preparing eel dishes for general use. Suddenly, the king slams his fist down on the table with all his might, making almost all his loyal subjects jump. Young Tidus almost had his heart in his heels from such a loud blow, but he remembers in time that they are beating the table with their fist here to express their agreement. The king turns to D and says that he brought their country a truly worthy gift, so the ruler wants to reward him for it. The king asks D what he wants. The faithful servant kneels down as a sign of respect. Little Tidus thinks that his father will definitely behave with restraint, but the boy's mom is not going to let this happen. Suddenly, little Tidus abruptly kneels down next to his father and shouts that he wants to ask His Majesty for something. The father looks at his son uncomprehendingly, but little Tidus continues, asking the king to let his grandparents at least temporarily return to their village and forgive Princess Veti for what she did during a trip to their village. The mother and father look at their son with surprise and incomprehension. The king, thoughtfully, is silent. There was complete silence in the waiting room, and more than one person did not dare to break it. Suddenly, one of the king's subjects rises and says that this was a great disrespect and self-confidence on the part of Tidus. But the boy claims that his grandfather and grandmother were not guilty of anything at all. One of the subjects asks the child if he understands what he is saying. He doesn't understand what right Tidus has to demand something from the king. The boy continues to scream, saying that he knows, but then says that even he understands that a person must admit the mistakes he makes. Suddenly, a hand falls on Tidus's shoulder. The boy turns around and sees his father, who is looking gloomily at the child. Then he swings, preparing to slap his son in the face for showing disrespect to the king. The hand begins to move towards Tidus, but suddenly the king orders his father to stop. D's hand freezes a few centimeters from his son's face. All those present kneel down, and the king, on the contrary, stands up. Then he walks up to Tidus and picks him up. The ruler asks if he really is only 2 years old. He calls Tidus a very brave boy. The king translates the name Tidus as ruling people. He says it's a very good name. Then the man says that he wants to ask the boy something. The king says Tidus was talking about a temporary return. The man asks what he meant. The boy explains that even if it is a mistake, it will still be very difficult if His Majesty suddenly decides to cancel Princess Beta's order. Tidus continues that, in this case, his parents would be very happy if his grandparents could return to the village at least sometimes to rest. Tidus says he thinks it will be very difficult to convince everyone to allow it. The king looks at the child with a puzzled expression on his face. Then he laughs loudly at the whole hall. Then he says that it looks like his daughter is still growing up and growing up. He says that little Tidus, putting his desires on the back burner, decided to ask him for something for his parents. Then the king asks if this was the mistake of his daughter Vetya. The hero responds by saying that when the princess traveled to the villages and reported to the king about the goods that are made there, she hid something from the king. Little Tidus says that Princess Veti tried to separate his parents behind the king's back, and this is simply unfair. Little Tidus asks if his father seems so unreliable. The king replies that the princess did not tell him about it. He also says it's really unfair. The king decides that Veti should not behave like this. The man says that Tidus is a good boy and that he is doing well. Then he loudly asks D if what Tidus just said is true. The man presses his lips tightly together and then clearly replies that it is true. The king smiles and says that it is good and even wonderful. He says he always wanted this country to have a bright future. The man says that he hopes his country will shine forever, but then he says that they are not gods and can make mistakes, so he will correct this mistake for the sake of justice. All the loyal subjects of the king continue to sit on their knees. Suddenly, the king slams his fist loudly on the table again. Everyone starts shouting the word yes, expressing their agreement with the king's decision. The king and the prime minister exchange glances. And then the ruler says that as his respect for Tidus's achievements, he will allow his grandparents to temporarily return to the village after his prior notification. He says he hopes the boy will continue to strive for new heights. Then the king turns back to the boy with words about Princess Vetya. The king says that he entrusts her to D for re-education, and that from this day forward and for many years to come, by the word of the king, he forbids her to marry D. The king turns to Tidus's dumbfounded parents and says that he hopes that D will be able to take advantage of what Tidus gives him. The hero does not understand what the king is talking about. He is surprised and at the same time scared by the idea that Princess Vetya will live in the same house with him. The king smiles slyly. Tidus thinks that upon arriving in the kingdom, he and his parents managed to get an audience with the king, during which they successfully prove to him that the eel is quite edible. As a thank you for his efforts, little Tidus asked the king for permission so that his grandmother and grandfather could return home at least for a short time, and also begged him not to punish Veti. In truth, Tidus thought that for such insolence the king would sentence him to death. Suddenly, Tidus's loud "what" is heard throughout the hall. The boy looks dumbfounded at the king and his parents. He asks if the adults knew from the very beginning what he would be asking for. The king says that this is indeed the case. He says that yesterday he and D discussed in detail the desired reward. Tidus looks at the king in confusion and asks what it means that all this time they were just mocking him. The king laughingly replies that this is most likely the case. Parents hug Tidus. D says that even though the boy promised to be quiet and not do anything stupid, they still thought it would be better to be safe and decided everything in advance. Tin says that they are glad that there were no excesses. Tidus looks at the adults in embarrassment and slightly offended. The king tells him that he has not yet decided what to do with Veti after all that has happened, but now, thanks to little Tidus, he seems to know what to do. Little Tidus asks if the king really wants to give the princess to their family for temporary care. The boy asks if he can really call Veti his older sister now. The king says that, roughly speaking, he can call her that. But then, frowning in a serious expression, she says that she can only be pitied. Suddenly, the prime minister enters the conversation. He asks to be allowed to clarify this point. He says that in their country, all the natives of the royal family are equated with deities. To run a country, having loyal subjects who follow the king like a god is extremely useful. Someone has gone too far in their faith. The minister says that, fortunately, it has not reached the king yet, but it has already had an impact on the lives of his family members, which is why it has brought many problems to the state. Suddenly, the king enters into conversation. He says that his daughter Veti serves as an excellent proof of the minister's words. The king says that the retinue, teachers, and everyone around her run around in front of her like weak-willed slaves, and it's not good for her at all. The girl, listening to hundreds of sweet speeches addressed to her, quickly succumbed to them and turned into a real egoist. The king says that at this rate they will get to the point where in the future someone will take advantage of her blind confidence. The Prime Minister continues, saying that this is why, as punishment, they decided to temporarily exclude Vethi from the official list of members of the royal family, as well as restrict her access to information on state affairs. The Prime Minister says that next, they will need the help of Tidus to figure out who is currently trying to woo Vetya for personal purposes and bring this person to light. The surprised family listens attentively to the minister. The man continues, saying that they should know that maybe in the eyes of others the girl looks like an egoist, but in fact he is just another victim of those who instilled in her a sense of her own impunity. He re-enters the conversation. He asks the family to take care of the little spoiled princess. He asks the family to cultivate a sense of restraint and modesty in it. In response, D gets down on one knee and says that he will do everything in his power to do this. The king then turns to Tin and says that he expects the same from her as from D. Then he asks if there are any objections. The girl, lowering her head, says that as long as she does not try to come between her and D, the girl will love her like her own daughter. At this moment, little Tidus realizes that his parents don't hate Vetti that much. Suddenly, Tidus looks up at the king and asks if he is trying to give his parents a pig. The king smiles and then starts laughing loudly. The man asks if little Tidus is really only 2 years old. He then asks the child not to worry, as Vethi will no longer try to marry D. Then the king says that if so, then little Tidus has a chance to marry Princess Vetya himself. But then he says that since Vethi has become his older sister, it has become impossible. Tidus says to himself that he is pleased with this. Suddenly he says that little Tidus, if he wishes, can return Vetti to the royal family. His Majesty says that the boy can consider this a small gift from him. The boy's parents just laugh at the whole situation. Tidus is thinking about making his parents stop laughing at him. He asks them for mercy. The action is transferred to the family room. The parents are already asleep, and little Tidus thinks that a lot of things happened today, but he is happy that in the end it led to good results. But despite all the good things that happened today, something is bothering the boy. Suddenly, his stream of thoughts is interrupted by his father, who noticed his son's rescue and asked if he was awake. The boy replied that he just felt sorry for Vetya. He says that the princess will be stripped of all rights and title, and also separated from her family. The father says whether the boy understands that all this is just to protect the vet. The boy looks up at his father uncomprehendingly and asks him what they want to protect the branches from. The man says that in order to conduct political affairs competently and carry out reforms, the country needs law and order. D says that at the moment the young princess is not capable of this. She is used to being worshipped by everyone around her and can push her around. The boy asks to correct her negative traits for the better. The princess will be sent to live with them. The father replies that this is exactly the case. He says that as soon as they make sure that Vetti is ready for life in society, has learned to control herself and her emotions, has become wiser, only then will they return her to the palace to her family. The family falls asleep together in a soft and comfortable pastel. The action is postponed to the next day. In the throne room, his own daughter is kneeling in front of the king as a sign of respect. The king announces that from now on, Her Highness Vetti is stripped of all royal regalia and sent to the care of the D family. The girl is in complete shock from what she has heard. The young Princess Veda had no choice but to silently obey the king's decree. At the same moment, several dishonest people who tried to challenge this decision were arrested one by one as soon as they opened their mouths. Tidus's family, however, finally gathered all their belongings and took their belongings with them and prepared to leave for home. In the carriage of the Tidus family, the little princess was very upset and curled up in a ball, quietly sad. Tin and Tidus were looking at the little princess intently. Suddenly, the boy turned to Vetya as a sister. He asked if she was okay. The girl looked at little Tidus in surprise. The boy asked if his newfound sister was in pain and held out his fragile hand to her. The boy wanted to hug the former princess but did not have time. The girl was the first to rush to him and began to hug him tightly. She sadly began to say that all her life everyone around her had been telling her that she was a deity sent down to the royal family from heaven. But at the same time, only the boy and his parents saw in her a real living person. The boy quietly says that this is indeed the case. The little ex-princess continues, trying to say something else. A little girl is crying, hugging Tidus. The boy realizes that it seems that Vetti did not have any romantic feelings for his father from the very beginning. The boy realizes that he has only now realized that she just lacked a normal family. The Tidus family, arriving in their village, announces to Vetti that from now on they are her family and she is their daughter. Dee says it will be a little difficult for her at first, but she will get used to them over time. The girl looks at Dee, Tin, and Tidus incredulously. Then she takes Dee's hand and hugs with everyone. The action is postponed for several days ahead. All the villagers gathered in a large field where various cereals are grown. Sepha, standing behind Dee, shouts that the day has finally arrived, which all the villagers have been waiting for a whole year. Dee, looking around at everyone present, says that the time has finally come to harvest. All the villagers are cheering. Harvest Day is taking place in the village today. All people, from young to old, or to be more precise, over the age of 4 and into old age, joined this event. Little Tidus was also taken, but only because he has his own sword. Suddenly, Vedi calls out to little Tidus. She asks if he wants to drink. The girl brought water to her named younger brother. The girl offers to get the boy drunk. Tidus says that he's already a big boy and therefore he can drink himself. To this, Vedi hugs Tidus and calls him a good girl and a good boy. The boy tries to escape from the tight embrace of the named elder sister. Then the girl offers her help. But Tidus responds to this by saying that she has not yet got used to the local traditions, so the girl will plod like a turtle. Vedi calls Tidus very wonderful. The boy thinks that even though very little time has passed, but still the boundless love of mom and dad, which they tried their best to give to Vet, began to bear fruit. This was especially reflected in Tidus. Ferial and Jesse look at Vedi hugging Tidus. Jesse says Tidus is in big trouble. Ferial tells her that this is the norm, since she is now his sister. At this time, Vedi is trying to feed Tidus with something. He shouts that the girl has already got him very much, and that he already knows how to eat himself. Ferial and Jesse think Vedi is a little overprotective. Little Tidus thinks that thanks to the cart that Uncle Bear helped them make, the collection process has become much faster and easier. Suddenly, Dee says that everyone has done a great job, and now they can all start preparing for the Harvest Festival with a clear conscience. All the townspeople are surprised at how quickly time has flown by, as well as what a rich harvest this year. Suddenly, Vedi and Tidus are called by Tin. She says they're already leaving. The children turn at the sound of their mother's voice. The action shifts to the village, where Vethi is trying on a new dress. She asks if it's okay that the hem is so short. Little Tidus says it suits her very well. The girl, hearing the praise, decides to show her new dress to the others. Tidus asks if his newfound sister will go to the festival. Tin replies to his son that, of course, the girl will also go to the festival, but it's too early for her to go on dates. Most likely she'll just take a walk and get into the atmosphere. Tin explains to his son that the Harvest Festival is a great time for lonely hearts to meet. She says that unmarried girls and boys specifically choose this day to spend time together. Then Tin dresses his son in his new outfit. The boy is delighted with his outfit. He calls it very cool. Tin says that she is just sure that her son will definitely be in the center of everyone's attention today. Then my father enters the room. He asks if everyone is ready, as the holiday is about to begin. At this time, the hero does not understand what his mother meant. Then the action shifts to the streets of the village, and the hero finally understands what Tin was talking about. He stands in the very center among many other children and waves a spikelet. He thinks to himself that he didn't really need such attention. All the children line up like a snake and are going to walk through the streets of the village. Tidus was at the head of this children's group. The boy did not understand why he should go first, and then he remembered that he was the youngest. The children walked slowly along the paths, and the sky was bright blue. Then all the villagers gathered at the priestess's dwelling. He came out of his tent and said that he saw that everyone had already gathered. Then he says that in such a case, they can already praise the gods for giving them such a generous harvest. He says it's time to have fun. The townspeople began to distribute food, arrange dances, and young girls and boys began to communicate with each other in order to find a mate. Tidus also did not stand aside. He brought various dishes to his parents and his named sister. All three thanked little Tidus. Dee calls his son a really good boy. Tin also talks about how well his suit fits on Tidus. Vedi, on the other hand, calls his named younger brother pretty cute. Tidus then asks his older sister Vetya if she will go dancing with everyone. The girl replies that she has been here recently, so she hardly knows anyone. The little girl is a little scared, so she decided to look from the side. Then Tidus suggests that everyone try the dishes he has just brought as soon as possible, as they may cool down. Tin praises his son. And my father says that Tidus brought the food just in time, because he was quite hungry. All the couples sit around the campfire. At this time, Tin tells her husband, son and daughter that it's time to return. Dee agrees with her and says that the festival was pretty good. When the family is about to leave, Vedi calls out to them. D, Tin, and Tidus look at the girl in surprise. She says that until now she believed that D did not belong in the village and that it was better for him to be somewhere where he could show himself and his strength, and Tin would be better off staying in the village and taking care of the household. She thought so before, because everyone around her said so. But now she began to realize that this was completely wrong. The girl says that without the two of them, not a single resident in this village, not a single seed would know happiness. The girl says that this is why she has become attached to them all this time, and therefore she feels that she should apologize for spoiling their lives with her selfishness. D, Tin, Tidus look at the former princess with surprise. They don't understand why the girl suddenly decided to say this. Tin tells Vetya that she doesn't understand what she's talking about. The girl says that the little princess has nothing to apologize for, that she is still their beloved daughter. D says that before she was just surrounded by people who inspired her with not good things. Little Tidus holds out his hand to the girl and invites his little sister to go home together. The little princess happily agrees, and a family of 4, laughing happily, runs towards the house. The action is postponed for several months ahead. The hero tells us that the festival was held without complaints, and it has been several months since Vedi started living in the Tidus family. D is sitting at the dining table with a serious face. His wife and children do not understand what is happening to him. Tidus is trying to find out what is going on with his father. Vedi says that D looks too serious. Tin asks if he's worried about something. D looks up at his family members and says he was thinking about deer. Tin, Tidus, and Vedi look at the head of the family uncomprehendingly and in surprise, and then all ask in unison if he really thinks about deer. Little Tidus wonders why an increase in the number of deer is not good. The father of the family says that deer began to ravage the fields, and at the same time, it is not easy to hunt them. The man says that recently they have a severe shortage of labor, so even cutting down one tree is no easy matter. But at the same time, he says that it is good that they now have carts, so it has become much easier for the soldiers. D also says that the deciduous trees began to disappear faster than they initially expected, and because of this, people began to go to the forest more often. As a result, the deer got used to people, and therefore, in search of food, they began to go out to fields belonging to people. Tidus, after listening to his father's story, concluded to himself that, in other words, the number of deer had increased due to his actions. Suddenly, the boy raises his little hand up, holding a fork in it, and says that he will come up with something. Little Tidus suggests to his father to fence the fields so that it would be more difficult for the deer to reach them. D says it's too expensive, so we need to come up with something else. Then the boy suggests another option. He says there is a way to catch deer quickly. The father is surprised by such a proposal from his son and asks him what method it is, since nothing like this comes to mind. The boy puts a small hand with a fork in it forward and asks you to rely on him. He promises not to let you down. Little Tidus comes to Sepha with his idea and suggests that he create barracks. He asks the boy if everything the boy said was caused by deforestation. The boy says that's exactly what it is. Tidus says that if the situation with the deer gets out of control, then they will not be able to do anything about it. Therefore, according to Tidus, for the sake of the villagers and for the sake of the deer themselves, they must find a compromise. He says that it will be quite difficult, because they cannot accelerate the growth of trees. Tidus thinks that, therefore, they need to control the rate of reproduction of deer, and to put it more roughly, they will have to send a serious number of deer to the next world for quite a long time. Sepha says he understood what Tidus was talking about. He says that then they will have to make fences first, which the soldiers will be great at. Tidus looks at the man in surprise and asks if they will overwork, since the soldiers also help in the fields. Sepha says that everything will be fine, because not all of their soldiers plan to continue living with a sword in their bosom. The man says that it will be useful for the soldiers to at least learn how to cultivate the fields properly, as this may be useful to them in the future. Little Tidus says that even if these people will not be soldiers in the future, they will still remain a part of their village. Sepha looks at the boy in surprise and then says that it's just charming. Sepha says that he loved their village with all his heart. Then the hero goes to the forest side of the village. There, he meets with Vedi. He asks if his older sister is really alone here. The girl answers in the affirmative. She says that she just decided to take a walk to get used to the village better. The girl asks what the hero is doing here. The boy replies that he is going to the workshop. He invites his older sister to go there together. The girl agrees. Children come to the workshop and turn to Giraffe for help. The man carefully reads the piece of paper that Tidus brought him. He says that this is another difficult order, and there is plenty of work in it. The boy looks up at the master and says that you always need to do something. Giraffe says that little Tidus is absolutely right. He also says that if you work more boldly, you will have more fun living. Then the man asks if he should contact the head of the village about the money. The boy says that there is no need to do this, because this time he will pay now. The boy says that the job is needed as soon as possible. The man says that he simply cannot refuse little Tidus. Then he turns to his colleagues and tells them to get to work. The artisans get to work, and the children set off on their way back. The girl walks with her head down sadly. The boy asks her if she is okay. The girl says that Tidus is always trying to help the village, but she just walks around and does nothing. The girl looks down sadly. The hero sadly looks up at her and looks at her intently. Then he takes his older sister by the hand and tells her that this is not the case at all. Tidus says that although she made a mistake earlier, but then she did her best. The boy says that she is just grown-up people who were with her acted meanly. Little Tidus looks calmly and resolutely at Veti and tells her that she has done nothing wrong. The little princess looks at her younger brother in surprise and then laughs loudly. A little girl throws her arms around her younger brother and says thank you to him. The girl says that she is very happy and that she loves little Tidus. The boy, frightened by her such a violent reaction, breaks out of her arms and runs away. The girl goes after him and asks her to wait. Next, the action shifts to deer traps. Little Tidus says that these traps are finally ready. Dee asks her son why they need these nets. Little Tidus points to the structures that were made by Giraffe and says it's such a cool trap. The father asks his son about it again. The boy begins to explain, saying that artiodactyls, including deer, get scared when they step on a surface with holes. They don't like walking on them, and such a trap exploits this instinct. Then the boy says that the soldiers will drive the deer at her. Dee tells his son that he seems to understand his idea. The boy tells his father to just watch. Then little Tidus shouts to Sifa to start. The man asks you to rely on him. Sefa then turns to his comrades and tells them that they will act as originally agreed. That is, they will drive the deer into the fields. The soldiers throw affirmatively and then scatter. Father and son are watching everything from the sidelines. Dee asks Tidus what is going to happen now. Tidus tells him that he will be able to see everything for himself now. And now, not far from them, the first deer appears, which is being driven into a trap. The animal runs so fast that it does not notice the obstacle ahead. The soldiers are driving the deer from all sides, and so the deer steps with its hooves on the trap prepared for it. Stepping on the net, the animal immediately became confused and did not understand what to do next. Seifa was very happy about it. 2 soldiers immediately jumped up to the deer and immediately tied it up and then dragged it out of the trap. The father and son continued to watch this picture. Dee, after seeing everything that was happening, said that now he finally understood what the trap that his son had come up with was. He says that in the end, the deer cannot get off these traps. Then he asks if it's not easier to just hunt them. The boy replies that not everyone is as strong as Dee, and besides, arrows break quickly. Dee accepts Tidus's point of view and says it would be better if they could catch deer at no extra cost. Suddenly, Sefa rides up to them on a horse and says that this is not a difficult case, but at the same time, it turns out to be a pretty strong workout. He says that it will be easier for his soldiers in cavalry battles later. They need to hone their teamwork. Here, Tidus turns to Sefa with a question about whether the soldier is tired, since he has already rounded up quite a large number of deer. Sefa replies that he is not tired at all, as he has been training for quite a long time. Besides, he sees the result of his labors. Here, Dee enters into the conversation, saying that even if they catch a bunch of deer, the village does not need so much. But then little Tidus has a new idea. He turns to Sifa and his father. He tells them that he really has a great idea. Sefa and Dee look at each other, thinking about what little Tidus has come up with this time. As they ride slowly on horseback, Sefa thinks that Tidus has most likely come up with some new way to earn a lot of money. The sky is bright blue and quite clear. The boy lies on the floor of the room and reflects on the fact that he did not think that such a fuss would arise. He recalls that men and women of all ages almost fought over deer antlers that night. As a result, little Tidus had to take absolutely all the horns. Everyone present tried to calm him down and persuade him to give up the horns, but the boy did not believe any of them, because everyone had everything written on their face. Then, little Tidus went to the workshop and began to do something with the horns. At that moment, Vedi came into the room and looked at her named younger brother in surprise. The girl came up from behind and asked what the boy was doing now. Tidus replied that he grinds deer antlers in order to make medicine out of them. Vedi then points to a nearby vase and asks what is in it. The boy replies that he put venison there. Vedi looks at his brother in surprise and asks him why he did it. The boy smiles slyly and says that he will see and understand soon. Then the action is postponed for a couple of days ahead. Little Tidus comes to his mother and shows her a medicine made from deer antlers. Tin is happy to take the medicine that her beloved son made. He thanks Tidus for this. Then the boy comes up to his mother and whispers in her ear that you can only take these pills one at a time. Tin says that her son can count on her in this matter. The boy looks at his mother uncomprehendingly. Then the boy thinks that everything worked out with the medicine, and now he can move on to the next stage. Little Tidus took the venison out of the jug to dry. Then he cooked it in the same smokehouse in which he had previously made fish. Then the boy let the meat rest for one night, and in the morning he lightly fried it. After all the preparations, the boy called his parents to look at his new invention. He said it was venison jerky. Tidus's father was the first to taste this dish. He quite liked the cooked meat. It was much softer than he had expected. Tin expressed a similar reaction. She said the meat tasted better than if it had been fried, and besides, it cooks faster than salted. Bethy said that the more she chews it, the tastier it gets. She says she would have eaten it all her life. The whole family enjoys the meat that Tidus cooked. The boy explains that this is an easy way to cook meat on a camping trip. The father asks his son if his son cooked it by analogy with fish. Then he says that he is sure that there will be a demand for such meat. Tidus asks his father if they can catch a lot of deer in this case. D says that, in fact, they don't just need meat, so they can also hunt. D says that in the future he will be able to sell such meat. The boy is very happy about this outcome. He thinks to himself that this will make them a lot of money. The hero realizes that it was not in vain that he invested in a deer trap. Then the boy thinks that it is possible to make skins and make fertilizers from bones and viscera, and thus they eventually solve the problem with deer. Besides, now they have dried meat for sale. Little Tidus, looking at the concentrated face, asks if the meat he cooked is being bought. The father answers in the affirmative and adds that it sells very well. D says that they buy up all the meat, even the one they make at an inflated price. This makes Tidus's father even feel awkward. Little Tidus comforts his father, telling him that they are not deceiving anyone, so there is no place for awkwardness. Privately, he thinks that the village, in this case, will not have problems with money for a while. The action is postponed for several months ahead. Little Tidus has a birthday on this day. Tin says that little Tidus often makes her worry, but at the same time, they are very proud of him. Then Tin and Vedi give little Tidus his birthday present. The whole family is looking forward to when the boy finally opens his gift. Little Tidus opens the gift and sees gorgeous trousers that he really likes. Then the father comes up and says that now it's time for a gift from him. The boy asks where this gift is. D says that unfortunately he is not here. The man says that the gift he wants to present to Tidus is currently at the horse market. He suggests that Tidus go after him. The boy looks at his father in surprise and does not say a word. Then he shouts very loudly, asking his father if his gift would be a horse. The action is transferred to the horse market. The boy looks around with surprise and anticipation as he walks between the horse rows. He sees horse auctions and the way the villagers buy them. The boy starts running along the shopping malls. The boy runs up to one of the merchants and greets him. He asks if the boy is looking for a horse. Tidus answers in the affirmative. D tells the merchant that Tidus has only recently turned 3 years old. He asks the merchant if he will help them choose a suitable horse. The merchant agrees and asks them to wait a minute. Tidus is waiting with bated breath for his gift. 3 horses are brought to him, from which little Tidus will have to choose his steed. The merchant says that the boy will be able to ride such a horse when he grows up, and now. He says they are quite large but calm. Then he says that these horses are a little smaller than usual because they were born out of season. Tidus is delighted. Dee quietly asks her son to calm down so that he does not scare the horses he brought. The boy takes a deep breath in and out and eventually calms down. He opens his eyes and walks over to one of the horses. The boy silently looks at the horse and then decides to come closer to it. The boy touches the horse's side with his small hand and begins to stroke it slowly. Then the boy smiles very sweetly. Then little Tidus comes up to his father and says that he likes this particular horse. The father is surprised to ask his son if he really chose a horse for himself. The boy says that this horse is mature and obedient. She has an intelligent look, and she was looking at him all the time, so the boy decided that he wanted her. My father says that this is really a very beautiful and stately horse. That's why D thinks everyone will like him. D approaches the merchant and says that they are taking this particular horse. The boy comes up to the horse and hugs him by the muzzle. Tidus is very happy to meet his new friend. The father, taking his son on a horse he bought, asks if the boy has come up with a name for him. The boy chuckles thoughtfully. Then he says that he will name the horse Bedia. D tries to change her son's mind, saying that Bedia is a female name. To this, the boy replies that he loves his horse like his dearest wife. The father mockingly asks his son not to scare the horse with his love. D draws his son's attention to his ears. He says that even very obedient horses get very nervous when they find themselves in a new, unfamiliar environment. D says that the horse moves its ears because it is trying to make sense of the situation. The boy looks closely at his father and says that he understood what he was talking about. D tells Tidus not to worry, as he will gradually learn to understand his horse's feelings. The father is sure that Bedia will respond to her son in the same way. The boy is smiling happily. Suddenly, father and son hear a loud aha. It turned out to be Tin and Vedi. The girls say they've finally found them. Tin says that the horse is very handsome, and despite being a little small, he looks pretty smart. Vethi adds that it's just like Tidus. Here, my father enters into the conversation and says that today it is so hot that even he is sweating. So D suggests we go and wash Bedia. Little Tidus agrees with his father's opinion. The whole family goes to the stables. D and Vedi are carrying water to wash Tidus's horse. The boy and his mother take up the brush and begin to wash the horse. The boy brings his face closer to the horse's muzzle, which gently touches the child's nose with his nose. Little Tidus pulls away and says he's tickled. Suddenly, Fariel and Jessie appear and are very happy about Tidus's new horse. They are surprised that a boy at such a young age already has a horse. The boy asks his friends not to scream, and then he introduces the horse to the girls, saying that his name is Bedia. The girls are moved by the horse's name. Then D enters the conversation and says that they wish you happy birthday once again. Father says that thanks to the things Tidus came up with last year, they were able to focus on wheat. Then the man says that in the coming year, they will have even more horses, and they owe it to Tidus. D ends his speech by thanking little Tidus for having him. The boy looks at his parents and sister in surprise, and then happily agrees with his father's words. The boy thinks to himself that a lot has happened over the past year. He thinks that now we can say that there has been a replenishment in the family, and he's wondering what next year will bring. The boy thinks that he is looking forward to new adventures and achievements. At this time, all those present crowd around the horse and communicate with each other. The action is transferred to the day when little Tidus learns to ride, and his father helps him in this. D tells her son to stay steady. The deputy points out to him that he needs to tighten his chin. The boy is naughty and says that he will get used to it for a very long time. The father objects, saying that Tidus definitely needs to learn how to keep the correct position in the saddle. D continues, saying that first his son needs to start counting on his horse. The boy needs to try to make Bedia get used to everything as quickly as possible, and the boy himself needs to get used to it. D then notices that Tidus has started flying in the clouds. The boy thinks that his dad is too strict when it comes to horses. Then the action is transferred to Vethi and Tidus. The girl says that Tidus has somehow grown up. The boy asks her if this is really the case. Vethi replies that he's grown up just a little bit. Then he hugs him, saying that he is very handsome and cute. Suddenly, Giraffe comes up to them and says that little Tidus has matured. He assumes that this happened because the boy recently turned 3 years old. Little Tidus shifts the subject, asking if Giraffe has finished with his order. The man says that he had previously come up with a pump for a large chigir. Then he says that wood resin is a wonderful material. It does not let water through at all. The hero also explains that wood resin is a liquid remaining after wood vinegar. It can be used as an adhesive. Dried wood resin becomes waterproof. It is also relatively safe for humans. The hero says that now they are trying to make a large chigir to supply water to agricultural land. They use resin to keep the wheel from falling apart. The hero looks at the drawing of the pump and thinks that everything seems to be fine. Then the hero asks Giraffe not to forget to make more resin, because in the future, it will be very useful to them. Giraffe says he will do everything in the best possible way. The action is transferred to the house of Tidus. D is talking about a new idea proposed by Tidus, namely the creation of an artificial reservoir. The boy explains to his father that they do not have to cultivate fields near the river, as they can simply direct the water to the village. Besides, it will be much safer this way. Then little Tidus says that it will be better for both people and the forest. D, looking at her son in surprise, says that it will be very difficult to build such a large watercourse. The boy objects, saying that they will make it not from clay and stone, but from concrete. The father looks at his son uncomprehendingly. D says he doesn't quite understand what Tidus is talking about, but he also wonders if the boy has the materials for the so-called concrete. The boy says he's not sure yet, but it looks like there's a volcanic mountain next to them. Therefore, the boy thinks that everything will work out. D says that he seems to understand his son's idea, and then decides that pumping water is quite an interesting thing. But then D says that they don't have any money or materials right now, but if they dig up a little bit, then D thinks they can arrange it. The boy just glows with happiness after hearing his father's words. And then the boy says that he now has a horse, so he can look for materials himself. The father strictly says that he will not let his precious son go alone. The boy is shocked by these words. The father explains that if something happens, the son will not be able to protect himself. D says that's why he doesn't want to let his precious boy go alone. Then he says that if Tidus wants to go somewhere alone, then he must train hard and diligently. The boy gives up. It's daytime, and the sky is blue and pretty clear. Father and son go out into the yard again for riding practice. D asks her son to try to drive around the village in a circle. The boy agrees. The boy and his father go out into the field. Little Tidus thinks to himself that D has been watching over him since the morning, although it is already slowly but surely evening. D looks around carefully, and Tidus notices it. The boy remembers that in the spring, the nomads move their villages. He assumes that most likely he will soon move to the meadows. Nomads and settled peoples have very different values. Weak groups gather together, and strong groups protect them. This is a natural and logical method of cohabitation, allowing everyone to develop. But some groups use their position to rob others. D and Tidus have been walking outside the village since the morning, so the man is also patrolling the area. D and her son continue their training. Suddenly, the boy notices something in the distance behind the trees. He immediately attracts his father's attention by saying that there is something behind the trees. The man is peering intently into the dense grove. Then D says that these are Cadans, northern nomads, namely a trading caravan. Then the man says it's time for them to go back. D and Tidus return to the village. The boy gets off the horse and gently strokes it. Suddenly, someone calls out to D. The man turns to a familiar voice. It turned out to be Sepha. D asks the subordinate what happened. The man replies that the Cadans have arrived, but they were not in the mood at all. D wonders why this happened. Sepha reports that the nomads were attacked on the road, and because of this, they were seriously injured. That's why they want the villagers of D to take in the wounded. D says he understood what Sepha was talking about. The head of the village himself thought seriously. The man was thinking about how to act in such a situation. He then tells Sepha to contact Madame and ask her to find a doctor for the nomads. Kadina D asked to be sent to his home, and also to greet them with all warmth. Sepha, having received all the orders, went to the depths of the village. D turns to his son, saying that even if the meek Cadans are unhappy, it means that something really serious has happened. When D and Tidus return to the village, they are greeted by a middle-aged man who good-naturedly greets the head of the village. He says he and D haven't seen each other for about 4 years. D bows her head as a sign of respect for the man and says that they really haven't seen each other for a long time. D says that the title of Refresher Veda was bestowed upon him by the king himself. The man says that the head of the village is still as courteous. Then he says that he is very surprised how the village of D has grown. The man doesn't even see the end of the fence, the village is so big. D only replies that he tried very hard for the benefit of the village. The man then turns to D's wife. He tells her that the girl is still beautiful. Then he asks if the boy standing next to her is her son. Tin answers in the affirmative and introduces the boy, saying that his name is Tidus. Little Tidus bows his head as a sign of respect for his elders and says that he is very pleased to meet a man. The boy once again gives his name and says that he is the son of the head of the village, and also tells your age. The man is surprised that Tidus, at the age of 3, was able to remember such a difficult greeting. He calls him a very smart guy. Next, the man introduces himself, saying that his name is Kadina. He says that the clan is also called. Kadena crouches down and pats Tidus on the head, saying that Tidus looks very much like his mother, but the sparkle in his eyes is very similar to his father. The man tells Tidus to study hard so that in the future he can become a good heir for D. The boy says he will definitely do it. The action then shifts to D, who has already brought the nomads into his house, and asks them to warmly greet the villagers. The tables are filled with different dishes, and everything is in its place. One of the Cadens, tasting one of the many dishes offered, says that it reached them through merchants, but fresh is a completely different matter. Another friend of his tastes white fish and says that it is very tender and literally melts in his mouth. Then he offers the person sitting next to him to try these meat things. He says they are very juicy. While all the nomads were eating, Kadena talked with D and his family. The man says that everything is fine in the village of D. He says that the village head used to be very poor. D replies that they used to have to eat mud and drink from puddles, but now everything has become much better. He says they tried very hard to get their lives back together. Kadena says that he is very glad that D has succeeded in life and that he is fine. D then asks Caden how the nomads are doing. On this question, the head of the nomads lowers his eyes and his gaze becomes sad. He asks if he can tell the truth. As a result, he reports that they were often attacked by bandits from Belarusia, a northern country, and not only them, but also the soldiers of this country too. D is outraged, saying that these lands have belonged to them, the nomads, since ancient times. He doesn't understand how those people only have the audacity. The head of the northern nomads says that besides, the king of bandits and soldiers gives them the go-ahead for banditry and robberies. He says it's pretty shameful. The man says that thank the gods that no one was killed and all the wounded will soon be on their feet. The man says that his warriors fought very bravely, but one mistake is to be in trouble. After these words, Kadena gulps down the drink from the cup. Then D says that lately there has been a lot of talk about a violent showdown in the north, but if the government is also involved in this, then it no longer goes into any framework. Kadena says he has visited the nearest villages, but no one will be able to help them because everyone is too poor. The man smiling says that not everyone has such a rich village as yours. D and Tin exchange glances, then the girl approaches her son and asks him to go to another room. Tin says she wants to ask Tidus for something. The boy looks at his mother in surprise. The general meal continues. People lead a quiet life, children play, mothers look after them and take care of them, not forgetting to communicate with each other. Then Tin and his son come into the room. She runs up to the crying woman and begins to comfort her, saying that he is safe now and will definitely recover. The boy looks at what is happening around him and thinks that it is not easy for his mother right now. He thinks they are most likely relatives of the victims. The boy looks sadly at everything that is happening, and thoughts come to him that it is not easy for his mother at all right now. He's going to help her by looking after the kids. As a result, he runs off to get the right things, thinking that, most likely, this is what Tin wanted to ask him. The boy brings his tablets and begins to study with the children of the nomads. So evening comes, and the hero returns tired to his room. The boy can't even hold his legs anymore. His mother runs up to him and calms him down, telling him to hold on. She says he's doing a great job. Behind them stands an uncomprehending vet. Tin turns to the girl and gently pats her on the head, saying that she is also a great fellow. The girl thanks her for her help with cooking. Suddenly, D comes into the room and says that he will interrupt them for a while. He asks them to listen carefully. D says that he and Kadena have come to the conclusion that Belarusia is planning to attack their village, as well as those closest to them. There is genuine shock in the eyes of little Tidus. D continues, saying that it's planting season, but the enemies are trying hard to find out their strength. The man says that they will most likely attack at the end of the summer. D says that this must be reported to the king. Tin and Veti look at each other in fright. The children conclude that a war may break out. D looks sadly at the children and says it's possible. Betty asks again, wanting to hear a different answer. Tidus, on the other hand, remembers all the wounded who were after the enemy attacked the nomads. The boy thinks to himself that this cannot be ignored. He thinks that something needs to be done with these to limit the likely losses. The war will begin soon. This statement shocked everyone. It was made by D a few days ago. The Cadens continued their journey to the west. These people sincerely want to find decent pastures. The children of the nomads cried, saying that they still wanted to play. The young people from the nomad tribe and the village had already admired each other, and it was unpleasant to separate the children. A boy from the nomad tribe approached Tidus. He turned to him with the words that they would see each other again. Tidus says that he will definitely look forward to this meeting with him. This boy is the leader of the Caden children, with whom Tidus became friends. The boy really did not want to part with him. Kadena says goodbye to D. He asks him to take care of himself and continue to be good friends with each other. D agrees with him. D then says that for the sake of the nomad's future, he wishes them good luck on the road. D, Tin, and Tidus look after the departing Cadens. Tin says she's kind of tired. The boy says that this is indeed the case since she has been very busy in recent days. The boy says that she had to do a lot of things. The mother pats her son on the head and says that he has also done quite a lot during this time. She then thanks him for his help. Suddenly, D catches their attention. He asks if Vedi is not standing there talking to two other girls. Tidus says he's going to run out and take a look. The boy runs up to his older named sister and asks her what they are doing here. The girl notices the boy. She asks if it's spring now. Then she says that they were thinking of going to pick wildflowers. The boy repeats to himself in surprise the phrase spoken by his sister. Then, with delight in his eyes, he asks Betcha if he can go with them. The boy says he wants to know more about them. Vethi says he can certainly go, as they could use some help. She then says that she trusts two more girls to Tidus. The same one looks at Vedi with incomprehension and shock. These girls turned out to be Farrell and Jessie. Little Tidus wonders how he didn't notice them right away. When the whole company was assembled, they all decided to go to the flower picking. They all went to the river, singing together. Tidus explains that they sang them for a reason, but to let wild animals know that people were coming their way. But depending on the season, some animals start to worry, so adults start singing, and only then children join in. Thanks to this, they are not in danger. The company came to the river in full force. The girls immediately went to look at the flowers. Tidus went to inspect the surroundings first. Suddenly, the boy discovered Hatuan. One of the girls comes up to him and asks if this herb is not bitter. The boy turns to her and tells her not to worry, because he has a plan. Then they return back to the village. Tidus's mom is surprised at how many different plants they managed to collect. She is very happy about it. Then Tin wonders how she's going to cook it all now. Here, Tidus enters into the conversation and says that he has a suggestion on this matter. Tin looks at his son with surprise and attention and asks what kind of offer it is. The boy looks slyly at his mother. Then they start cooking the plants. Vedi watches the process and then asks Tin if she really uses lard and if everything will be fine. The girl takes one plant out of the pot and turns to the girl, saying that of course everything will be fine. Then she continues to cook the plants. Then Tidus comes up and says he thinks that's enough. Then he says that now they need to be laid out and eaten while it's hot. Dee skeptically asks her son if he is sure that wild plants fried in oil will be delicious. Then he finally decides to try a new dish and says that it is quite tasty. Dee says the roasted plants are tender and easy to chew, and they're also sweet. He says they have a very interesting shell, and he just wants to try them with alcohol. Then the fried plants are decided to try Tin. She likes them very much too. She says they have a really nice texture and smell. Suddenly, Dee puts down the chopsticks and says that it's not that simple. The man says that if you overeat this thing, it will be hard in the stomach. Tidus says that there is tea from Hautuinium for such a case. Dee asks what he called this tea. The boy replies that this tea helps a lot after a heavy meal. Dee decides to try the tea and says that it is slightly bitter. Tidus says you just have to be patient. The family continues their meal. Then little Tidus begins to remember that there are many wild plants blooming in the spring, ready to be harvested, but time passes quite quickly. But then summer soon arrives, and with it the heat and moisture. The action is transferred to the river. Children are splashing in the river, and adults are watching them. Suddenly, something attracts the attention of little Tidus. He sees soldiers doing something nearby. He turns to Sepha with a question about whether they really have a training session here right now. The soldier listens attentively to the question posed by little Tidus. Sepha greets a little boy joyfully running to meet him. He decides to satisfy the curiosity of little Tidus and says that, since the war can start at any moment, they need to keep themselves in shape. A little boy thinks about the fact that very soon a war may begin, which will ruin the lives of many people. Sepha then turns to little Tidus, thanking him for improving the cart. Then he says that his soldiers are doing a great job, and he is very pleased that they began to shake less. Tidus thinks to himself that during this not very long time, the design of the wagons has undergone many changes. One of these was the invention of means by which they began to shake less. The boy says that in the old wagons it was convenient to carry only, for example, wheat, while something fragile could be broken quite easily, and because of this there was a lot of hassle. That's why little Tidus decided to ask Uncle Bear to improve the wagons. Seifa says that Giraffe has made several of these very comfortable carts. As a result, several people went to brag to the king about the resulting carts. The boy laughs contentedly, saying that he hopes that all these people will return soon. Little Tidus talks to himself about what he expects as gratitude for the improvement of the wagons. Here, Tidus remembers that the king promised to buy him several barrels of wine, and the boy dreamily imagined what his reward for all his hard work would look like. Little Tidus thinks that wine is a very valuable product, and it is not easy to get it. At the same time, he will be able to distill liquor from wine in order to buy other foreign goods later. Suddenly, Tidus is hailed by one of the soldiers. According to him, it can be understood that he had been looking for Tidus for quite a long time. He says the wagons have already returned from the capital. The boy quietly says that the rumors turned out to be true after all. But then he says that there is one small problem and asks me to come and take a look. Seifa and Tidus exchange worried glances. They begin to move away from the river, passing first through the forest and then moving into the field. Tidus is sitting in the arms of his loving mother. The two of them move towards their father, who is looking thoughtfully into the distance. Tin calls out to her husband and he turns to the voice. All three of them start looking down in surprise. From the high plain, where a huge amount of grass grows, there is a view of a rather long and heavily loaded caravan of wagons. Seifa gathered a small group of soldiers, and they went to meet the guests. As a result, they crossed paths with the trade caravan of the crown. There was no limit to the surprise of both the soldiers and Seifa and Dee themselves. It turned out that in the capital, they made a bunch of carts and loaded them with various materials and fabrics that could be useful in almost any craft. Then Dee, reading through the list attached to the many heavily loaded wagons, he discovered an extremely unexpected gift from His Highness. This gift turned out to be a whole mountain of alcohol. It was his king who promised little Tidus. In addition to the list of goods, Dee was also given a letter from His Highness. Dee looked at the man who was His Majesty's messenger with surprise. As soon as Dee opened the letter and carefully read its contents, a bright and cunning smile appeared on the lips of the brave warrior and good father. Dee handed the letter to his son, saying that His Majesty really liked the carts that little Tidus had invented and improved. The boy looked at his father with eyes full of surprise and then at the letter in his hands. The boy slowly, holding his breath, unfolded the letter given to him by his father. The boy read what was written in the letter and was very surprised. Suddenly, Dee turns back to his son and says that he deserves a decent reward. The boy looks at his father with surprise and incomprehension. Suddenly, two elderly people in bright clothes come out of one of the many carts. A man helps a woman out of the cart. Tin looks at the people who come out of there as if mesmerized. She can't believe that this is actually happening. It turned out to be Tidus's grandparents. Tin, seeing them, starts shouting the words "Mom" and "Dad" very loudly. Her father says they haven't seen her for quite some time. Her mom says she's glad they're all in good health. Little Tidus can't believe his eyes. He sees his grandparents and doesn't believe it's really them.